like Polish people and you don't trust them.
That's not what I said.
Yes, that's what you said.
No. You must have misheard me. I like Polish people a lot.
Christ me, I never heard of this from you. I've heard this on the radio.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. You want to have a listen? Have a listen to what I said. Okay. Listen to this.
Yes.
I don't like Poles. I wasn't talking about Polish people.
Yes.
I was talking about polls. You know, when you do a poll to find out what people think. You know, like they say, 55% of people vote Remain, 45% vote Leave. That's a poll. I wasn't talking about...
but later on you said you don't trust them, so you don't...
I don't trust them. No, that's true. I don't trust polls, and I don't like polls because I don't trust them. But that's not Polish people.
No, that's what I thought. That's what I pick up.
Oh, so I'm terribly sorry. Listen, well, I would never say anything like that.
No, so in this case, I never learned English.
No, listen, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. I'm very glad you called in because I wouldn't want you walking around thinking that Mike Graham is a horrible bigot. He doesn't like Polish people.
No, I was thinking, what the hell? What's going on here, actually? I must be back and explain a few things.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company this Easter Saturday morning. Very happy Easter to you. Lots to talk about, including Andrew Tate, the big education union in this country, saying that he is having a very bad effect on young people. He won't talk to female teachers. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about the local elections that are coming up in about 10 days' time as well. We've got Labour MP in the chair. Mike Tapp, the Labour MP for Dover and Deal, is with us. Also, could Trump walk away from Ukraine peace talks? And Rachel Reeves making the case for a trade deal. She's going to be meeting the US Treasury Secretary. The UN has backed Labour's approach in regard to refugee hub ambitions. Very interesting one there. And are Labour in the pocket of the unions in Birmingham when it comes to those bin strikes? We'll talk a bit about that as well. Something I'm very worried about is radicalisation in prisons. There are a lot of prisoners who go in, they're not terrorists, they're what used to be called ordinary decent criminals. Of course they're not, but they go in and they're radicalised by many Islamists there as well. The deal for them, they say, is convert or be hurt. We'll talk about that a little bit later on with the terrorism expert as well. What are your thoughts on all of this? We're talking about care as well. Lots of people, lots of carers listen to this programme and watch it as well. And actually, it's something we're talking on a little bit later on about why the government still hasn't held an all-party meeting on social care. Are they actually going to sort it? Is this a big issue that the government's just put in the too difficult box? Let me know your thoughts if you're a carer or you're someone who is cared for. 0344 499 1000. We'll talk about the Easter travel chaos as well. Maybe you're in a car at the moment, you're one of the car dwellers heading away for the weekend. And victory in Europe, INN Europe, pubs to stay open later as part of the VAE Day 80th celebrations. We'll get into that as well a little bit later on. Loads to discuss here on Talk. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. I can see the phones going already. Be sure to get your point across between now and 1 o'clock. You can text me 87222 with the word Talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Remember, the main number does three things. You can send me a WhatsApp voice note, you can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Plenty to talk about here on Talk. Let's get going. Well, Mike Tapp is the MP for Dover and Deal for Labour. Mike, thank you for joining me in the studio this morning. How are you?
Absolute pleasure. Yes, very well, thank you. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter. The local election, of course, in parts of England, not in Wales, not in Scotland, not in Northern Ireland, but in parts of England, is happening at the moment. And certainly there are many the opinion polls are very, very interesting. If you look at what Reform is doing, they're leading many polls at about 24-25%. Labour in second position, perhaps not making the impression your party has wanted to make over the last 9 months.
Well, it's an interesting local elections. When you look at the cycle, this is actually a test for the Conservatives, given that they're holding all of the county seats which are being fought over in May in just 10 days.
It was sort of peak Boris, wasn't it, in 2021?
Yeah.
That was the time they won the Hartlepool by-election, and Keir Starmer actually thought about resigning at that point, apparently. So a big test for them as well.
Absolutely. And look, it has been tough coming into government. The fiscal picture that we inherited has been difficult, but we've had some real successes. You look at that £1,400 in millions of workers' pockets. The impact we're already having on the NHS is not an easy nut to crack, and bringing down those waiting times and diagnosis times, which will quite simply save people's lives. We're also legislating to bring in counter-terror powers to take on the smuggling gangs. These are all really important aspects of people's lives.
You know, in Dover and Deal, that people coming across the channel are a huge issue. There have been more than 9,000 since, about 1,000 a month since Keir Starmer took over. Is he really smashing the gangs? Is that something you can really say that Labour has any grip on this whatsoever?
Well, look, we did inherit open borders. 400 crossed in 2018.
But when do you start taking responsibility as a government, Mike?
Well, we've had 150,000 crossed since. So this was never going to be a problem that we solve overnight. In the legislation that we're putting through already, bringing in MI5 and those counter-terror powers so we can get to the smuggling gangs before those boats are launched in a similar way we take on terrorists is vital. But we've got to remember that legislation is still going through Parliament and nothing is off the table. We're looking at potential returns agreements with the French. We've got the French looking at changing laws around tackling small boats in shallow waters. We've had the Germans change their laws around procurement of parts that are needed to cross, the Italians around illicit finance. We've had 40 nations over to talk and discuss how we combat this upstream. It's not an overnight fix, but I'm confident with the measures we put in going forward, we will get on top of this issue.
I suppose the question many people would ask is, we give the French about £500 million a year to stop migrants coming across. Why should we trust them and do another deal? Yeah,
and I said yesterday when we had an unfortunate death in the Channel that every boat launched from France is a national security and humanitarian failure, and it is important that our allies and our partners internationally work with us to get on top of this. And look, that's why I'm so pleased to see the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister working with our international partners to get on top of this, and we will see that have an impact over time.
We've got a message from Jason in the Lake District, and this is what he says. Can you ask Mike Tapp why Labour hates this country and the Indigenous people who are really concerned with the terrible consequences of illegal immigration forced on their communities and the banning of free speech on certain topics?
Well, look, we don't hate this country. We're a patriotic party. I've served the country. I've been to war for this country 3 times. And if we want to look at, fake patriots, you've only got to look as far as Nigel Farage, who's fawning over Putin.
Why do you say that?
Does not
Why do you say he's a fake patriot?
Flag. Because, look, we've seen this from other potential leaders in the past in this country, and we've rejected them. We have our British values, and that means standing up against dictators. And when we see the likes of Farage fawning over Putin, it's the public's responsibility to unite and reject that fake patriotism, which I'm sure we'll see going forward.
What has Keir Starmer done that's pro-British, do you think, in the last few months?
Well, actually, if you look at, firstly, what we're doing within the country, and that's standing up for working people, we've got to look at the
by imposing
minimum
national insurance
wage.
taxes?
Well, actually, the minimum wage going up for millions of workers by £1,400.
But if you want growth,
the
Mike,
Renters' Rights Bill,
and that's fair enough. But
yeah.
if you want growth in business, why impose such a huge tax on national insurance? Taking on that extra hairdresser, that extra plasterer, that extra apprentice, that's going to cost people money.
Well, what we're seeing actually is on the economy, the British economy being the second most attractive to invest in the G7. That's not easy. And also when you look at growth, building more, including what we're seeing in Bedford with that new entertainment park that we're looking at.
Theme park,
theme park, that's the word. That's going to bring more jobs as well. And also, workers' rights is vital. Bringing up rights for renters, that all feeds into hard-working people. And you look at the likes of Reform, they've voted against all of those measures. So on one hand, they'll say, look, you know, we're here for working people, but this is a bunch of predominantly millionaires who are voting against rights for working people. That's fake patriotism. We've got to reject that.
You've mentioned Reform an awful lot in this interview. Are they a bigger threat to you, do you think, than perhaps even the Conservatives, or maybe you want to talk about the Lib Dems?
Well, it's difficult to say. The Conservatives have had 14 years and they've destroyed the country, unfortunately. You've just got to look at the NHS, those waiting lists, antisocial behaviour on our streets and the destruction of our economy. So look, the Conservatives' record speaks for itself. Reform come at this and they say a lot, but actually they can't deliver. When you lift the bonnet and ask them how they will do what they say they will do, they've got no answers economically. It's similar to the Conservatives, where they want all the benefits that we are looking to put into the public's pockets, but don't say and won't say and can't say how they'll do that.
Dave has been in touch from Lancashire and says, morning Peter, what planet is Mike Tapp on energy costs up, illegal immigration up, council tax up, prices up? I have less money in my pocket. I'm fed up now with hearing it's the Tories' fault. And by the way, I've been to war for this country as well. What would you say to Dave?
I'll say, Dave, firstly, thank you for your service, and that's an opportunity for me to thank all those currently deployed in operations throughout Easter. The fact is, we did inherit a £21 billion black hole, and that isn't
I mean, that's disputed
overnight
by numerous people, including the Office for Budgetary Responsibility.
It's simply a fact, and we can't fix that overnight. We've seen some difficult decisions being made in the budget, but that's ensured £22 billion has been found to go into our NHS. That impacts everybody. Putting up the minimum wage impacts everybody. Our mission for growth will also create those jobs for hard-working people going forward too. We're 9 months in. You know, it doesn't happen overnight. We've got 14 years of destruction to fix.
John in Gravesend says, where is Mike's evidence that Farage has been fawning over Putin? This is a complete lie and he knows it.
It's not a lie. Look, we've seen what Farage has said about Putin. He's praised him. He's also brought into doubt the fact that Zelensky
he says that he admires him as a leader. I mean, right. That is... I'm paraphrasing. Hold on.
If Churchill said that about Adolf Hitler while he was invading Europe, we would not accept it, and we will not accept that from any leaders in our parliament now. We've also got to look at him calling for elections during wartime. That's absurd, and that just shows to us that it's another voice for Putin in our parliament, which we have to reject. That fake patriotism that does not stand up for British people cannot be accepted.
You've criticised Nigel Farage and you've criticised Putin. Are you going to criticise Donald Trump for perhaps saying that he's going to withdraw from peace talks in regard to Ukraine?
So what I say with Donald Trump is I admire his efforts to bring about peace here. We know how difficult that is. These are diplomatic challenges. It's very delicate. And of course, we shouldn't give a running commentary on everything.
Well, he has, and Marco Rubio has, and he is the Secretary of State, and he says if progress isn't going to be made, the Americans are going to pull out, should they?
Well, look, this is for their diplomatic efforts. What we've said, we're really clear, is we continue to support Ukraine in their war efforts against Russia, and of course continue that diplomatic.
So you've criticised Nigel Farage, you've criticised Vladimir Putin, but you won't criticise the Americans, Mike.
Well, look, I've no doubt that Donald Trump hasn't got everything completely right, but I will say I admire his efforts to bring about peace there, and we're a part of that, and it's just why a running commentary isn't healthy when it comes to diplomacy.
They've given one, but apparently you won't. In regard to Rachel Reeves, she has got a meeting with the US Treasury Secretary. What do you think is actually reasonable in a trade deal? A lot of nervousness around this, a lot of people saying, hold on a second here, we need some certainty for businesses, and businesses, of course, have had so little certainty in recent years.
Yeah, look, Rachel is a talented economist. We've also got a lot of talented diplomats working on this. I think it's quite boring almost for media and for myself, because there's not much we can say, because quite rightly those diplomatic efforts.
Well, what would a good trade deal look like? What are the sort of priorities for you in terms of a trade deal?
Look, for me, it's about getting what's best for this country going forward. So look, we've already managed to minimise what those tariffs might have looked like. We've seen worse across the world for many nations, and it's ensuring that going forward what we get is best for this nation. It's going to be very intricate, very complex for those engaged in those talks, and I'm confident we'll get what's best for this country.
You, as you say, served this country. You were in the army, and yesterday there was a story that I would just want to ask you about in regard to accommodation for servicemen and women. This has been a neglected thing for many years by successive governments. Now John Healey, the Defence Secretary, says he wants to sort it out. What was your experience, and what do you think needs to be done?
Yeah, I was quite lucky. So I left around 2012, and I was in singles accommodation because I was a young man having lots of fun. And actually I was in some of the new accommodation at that time. But, you know, I saw some of the really poor standards that were starting to come through then, and it's clearly got a lot worse. You know, we saw a lot of that accommodation go private back in, I think, 1996, and John Healey said that we're going to bring I think it's 32,000 units back into public ownership and ensure that those standards are there within the charter so that people have decent accommodation. Of course, Natalie Elphick will be overseeing some of that project.
Your predecessor.
Well. Exactly, yes.
Yeah. Are you happy that she's doing that?
Yeah, I think so. Natalie has worked in the property industry for some time. I think she was a property lawyer before going into politics, so she obviously knows what she's doing in that area, and it'll be interesting to see how that develops. And it's really important that our heroes are housed how they deserve to be.
Mike, thank you. That's Mike Tapp, who is the Labour MP for Dover and Deal. Plenty of response to what he has said, not all of it positive. We will go into that indeed with our debate desk panel. Peter Barnes will be with us, as will Andy Williams. You want to add your voice to what Mike has been saying and what I'm saying, and whether you agree or disagree with either of us, let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk.
Look, I don't know what Mr. Lowe is up to. What I do know is there is a police investigation. I do know that there is an investigation by the parliamentary authorities. Those will sort of carry on follow their course. But bluntly, we're just moving on. We are obviously we're working hard, campaigning around the country. And May the 1st is a very important day for all political parties, including Reform UK.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Andy in Thatcham has been in touch and says, please tell Mike Tapp that the more he denigrates and attacks reform and Farage in the way he has, it just encourages more people to do their own research and see that his comments are just word salad to gaslight the voters. Has he not learned anything from the mistakes the Democrats made in propelling Trump to his second term? That's what Andy in Thatcham says. Thank you for that. Lots on Mike Tapp. Lee says, same old, smash the gangs. I don't believe a word. Taff and Dover says, Mike Tapp keeps saying reform are not patriotic. I am a reform voter in his constituency and spent 23 years in the parachute regiment, did numerous operational tours, including one in 1982. Am I unpatriotic? Says Taff and Dover. No, I don't think you are, Taff. I think you're a very, very patriotic person. Of course you are. And and one of the great things about our great democracy is that we have free speech, and we have free speech on this station, and that's why we agree and indeed disagree without being disagreeable. Andy says, remind that idiot the Tories sorted the theme park, not Labour. Yeah, we were having competition the other day to see the various rides, and my suggestion was the Rachel Reeves Big Dipper for the economy. JB in Aberdeenshire says, I was listening, I respected what Mike Tapp said, but he lost me when he tackled the man instead of the bull by making spurious claims about Farage and Putin. I did challenge him on that, I should say. Pathetic, just another useless career politician. Howard says, the only thing I can say about Mike Tapp, he had the nerve to come on. The rest, blah, blah, blah. Where's the pathetic Home Secretary on the streets of the UK that nobody can walk safely on? That is what Howard has to say. Plenty more reaction, and we'll get into all of that. But I want to go to the debate desk now. Peter Barnes, who's a political strategist, is with us, as is Andy Williams, the political commentator. Thank you very, very much indeed for joining us. In terms of what Mike Tapp was saying there, he said he called Nigel Farage unpatriotic. He said that he had praised Putin, and he said that that was something that was not acceptable. Peter Barnes, what do you think?
Well, he called him a career politician. I'm going to hazard a guess. He's not going to have a very long career. I thought that was not a very good interview at all. I thought this attack on Nigel Farage, don't get me wrong, I'm a big reform critic, but this attack on Farage over the Putin comment is just ridiculous. It was one line about 10 years ago. It is absolutely ridiculous. If there are plenty of reasons to attack Farage, and there's plenty of reasons to have a go at reform, you don't need to manufacture this nonsense to try and do it. And it just kind of shows a political party that is just throwing mud because they can't defend anything that they've done, because everything they have done has either led to price rises or job losses.
And Nigel Farage is a fake patriot, Andy Williams. What do you think?
I'm not sure about that. I mean, there are a ton of things I'd criticise Nigel Farage for, but I actually do think he cares about Britain in a way that someone like Boris Johnson, I don't think, did. I think he only cared about himself. I think Nigel Farage does care. There's no other reason why he would have spent sort of 25, 30 years of his life campaigning for Brexit, which I think was a terrible outcome. But he believed in it, at least. On the Putin thing, I mean, he sort of did apologise for Putin a bit, didn't he?
Well, no, I wouldn't really say he apologised for him. I don't
he
think
made excuses for him. He made excuses.
No, not at all. Not at all. I think it was more of a... Again, it's bizarre that I'm defending Nigel Farage, but I feel very uncomfortable at that fact. But I do. For me, the comments that he's made are more of a kind of him as a person, him as a political figure, as an operator on the international scene. I don't think it's necessarily incorrect to say this bit about him is not necessarily good. I think
what you can say, for example, let's choose a controversial political, Stalin, right? You can say Stalin was an effective operator.
Yeah,
of course you can.
That doesn't mean that you think he was a good person.
No,
there are differences.
But he also made excuses in terms of saying, oh well, NATO have been a bit aggressive towards Russia, so they kind of backed him into a corner. But there is we have to be really clear. Some things are not up for debate. There is no excuse in any way, shape or form for Putin having invaded Ukraine.
Yeah, but then I think you could also be critical of NATO at the same time. This is the thing. People are presuming that his criticism, his admiration of Putin is somehow an attack on NATO. You could be critical of one thing and critical of another thing at the same time. It's this silly type of our politics where if you're not this, then you have to be that. You can have a nuanced position, and unfortunately we don't seem to allow them anymore.
Let's talk a little bit about what the challenges for Labour and the government this week. Rachel Reeves is going to be going to see the US Treasury Secretary, talking about a trade deal. What does a good trade deal actually look like, Andy Williams?
Well, I'm not an international trade expert, so
Really?
I can't tell you. I can tell you what one doesn't look like, which is some of the trade deals that Liz Truss signed when she was the International Trade Secretary. If you remember when she was Minister for Instagram, and she would sort of run around... No, not harsh at all. And she would kind of run around on planes. She'd turn up in Australia and she'd signed a dreadful trade deal that meant nothing more than the paper it was written on. So if we're going to get a trade deal, it needs to be meaningful, right? And not some kind of showy, oh, look at this coup, haven't we made friends with Trump? It looks like we're on the verge of getting a trade deal with India. And I think, did Rishi Sunak set that in train? I mean, it's been quite a few years. And so if we can make that happen, that looks like a genuinely, potentially transformative, proper, serious trade deal that was started by the Tories and hopefully will be concluded by this government. But yeah, I mean, if we can get a proper trade deal with the US, obviously that would be a tremendous outcome. But
yeah, I agree with you there. Again, I'm not a particularly trade expert, but the thing with the Americans is it's always been, and if you listen to a lot of the commentators and people actually who have been in the room, they said this is unlike any other trade negotiation. It's been like a corporate negotiation. They've come at this from a pure business perspective rather than a kind of broader international trade, the kind of international outlook that you would normally expect in these kind of negotiations. It has been very interesting to hear how, Britain has been caught continually trying to catch up with the Americans, even before the Labour came in, when, the groundwork was being laid. Look, I have to admit, Britain has not been the best at negotiations for some time, and I think we've fallen down quite a lot, and Trump has seemed to run the show, but the big thing is that we are seeing a very clear path, two paths drawn now between Trump's way and the EU and Europe's way, and this Keir Starmer is stuck at that crossroads now. I think he should go down the Trump way, but something tells me he's going to go down the EU way. But given Ursula von der Leyen's comments about soft Brexit off the table if he does cozy up to Trump, it's interesting to see the guy who frustrated Brexit for years sort of come up against the same hostile EU.
Well, I don't think it needs to be one or the other. I don't think we should look at it as, well, we either go down the US route or the EU route. I don't think that's how Keir Starmer's looking at it either. What is absolutely true is that the EU is not productive, not growing. Overall, its economy is struggling, and the US, until Trump came in and crashed the thing, has been quite productive. And even if you look at things like the comparison with salaries in the US versus the UK, I mean, the amount of money that people get paid in America, and they tend to pay less in tax, is unbelievable compared to here. Yeah. We have the average salary in the UK is less than the poorest US state.
One thing we haven't talked about is Rachel Reeves saying it would be very foolish for Britain to disengage from China as well. I just wonder where you think that is, because there's a security relationship, there's a trade relationship. Obviously, Donald Trump is attempting in some way to isolate Beijing, and what effect that, of course, has for people here in the UK as well, Peter.
Yeah, this is quite an interesting one. It might be the smartest thing Rachel Reeves has said since she became Chancellor, is that you can't just abandon China, no matter how much you may want to, because do not get me wrong, there are serious security concerns. It concerns me greatly that they still might have this super embassy just over the river here that David Lammy is very helpful leather for. I think that's very concerning. But China is in everything in the UK. It's in the nuclear sector, gas, water, the national grid, the ports, our comms network is in real estate, renewable energies. China is inside the United Kingdom, and that is very concerning. Look at what we've just seen with the steel industry. How it has been possible for a foreign actor, and I have to admit, an increasingly hostile foreign actor, to be so embedded in such national infrastructure is absolutely staggering to me. I think it is a dereliction of duty, just on the most basics. But it's not just that area. If we look at China in the education sector and our universities, they're giving 50 million a year to the university sectors, and the Chinese students basically fund most of the student fees. Reeves is right. We can't just ignore them, but we have to get tough with China.
I mean, I agree with everything that Peter said. The reality is that they are there. They're going to be the biggest economy in the world. In pretty short order, I think. It's 1.4 billion people or something. So we can't just it is not reality to just ignore China and push them to one side. But I do think we have to keep them at arm's length because they can't be trusted. You know, and we've seen it with Russia, who we appeased for too long, and until they started murdering people on British soil, you know, it was only then that we started paying attention.
They rolled out the red carpet a few years ago.
Liz Truss changed her mind on a number of occasions about the Chinese. Thank you to Peter and Andy on the debate desk. We'll return to that in a second, but I just want to read out a few of your messages. Jackie says, some things are not up for debate on Putin. Who does the left think they are? I know they're trying to abolish free speech, but we still have the ability to think for ourselves. Barry in Morecambe says, I admired how you managed to keep a straight face when Mike Tapp said Rachel Reeves is a talented economist. We were in stitches. Great show as usual. Barry, yes, my thoughts were not on display at that point, which is rare for me as I've got a terrible poker face. Jerry in Cardiff says, sorry Peter, that was an appalling interview. You could have challenged him politely but much more strongly. His attack on Farage was terrible. I'm not a Farage fan, but your gentle challenge did nothing. Sorry, says Jerry in Cardiff. Well, listen, we're continuing to talk about it. We've talked about it. Not everybody's going to agree with how I do interviews, and Jerry, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I hope you're still watching and listening. David in Worcestershire says, Mike Tapp, everything that is wrong with our politicians, deluded and not in touch with what is happening in this country, sent out to try to hurt Nigel Farage too. I hate these idiots and detest what is happening to this once proud nation. Zoe in Lancashire says, Mike doesn't have a clue. Starmer lies. They all lie. We as a nation are sick to death of the gaslit dribble that comes out of these self-serving governments' mouths. Take the hint, Labour, and man up to the promises you backed up from, says Zoe. And this person says, I think your guest, Mike, was in cloud cuckoo land, says more money in our pockets, working for people, but oil, gas, water, council tax, all increasing. He needs a reality check, and I will be pleased to see them suffer in the local election, says Mossy. Well, listen, I think you're right. I did challenge him on that point, and there are an awful lot of people, including me, who are feeling the pinch with Cashmageddon, certainly at the start of April when all our bills went up. Alan says Mike Tapp is living in a parallel universe. He thinks Labour are doing a wonderful job, when in reality the Labour Party is probably the most hated government this country has ever had. Stan says 20 billion black hole using as an excuse yet again, yet every other week Labour is giving away billions and billions. How does your guest explain that? I mean, just lots and lots of reaction to him. Let me do one more from Paul in Horsham. He says, sorry Peter, I had to turn the volume down. I can't listen to this MP saying what a great job Labour are doing, says Paul. Well, Paul, I hope the volume's up loudly and clearly, and we'll hear a lot more from Peter Barnes and Andy Williams on all sorts of issues, including the state visit from Trump. I'm sure Andy will be flying his flag at that point, and whether Trump is going to withdraw from Ukraine peace talks. Also, are Labour in the pockets of their union paymasters? That is certainly what some of the papers are saying. Analysis showing a quarter of Labour MPs gave cash to the union at the centre of the bin strikes. If you're in Birmingham, I want to hear from you on that matter too, or indeed anywhere else in the UK, an opinion on anything we're talking about. As I say, you know, we're the home of free speech here. Jerry sent me a message where he criticised me. I read that out because guess what? I want to hear from you, and I don't have a monopoly on wisdom. This is my show, but it's your show too. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Gary's been in touch and says your guest talks about British values. This was Mike Tapp, the MP for Dover and Deal. He was on a little bit earlier on. Well, says Gary, the overwhelming majority of people in this country with British values want independent and comprehensive inquiries into the Muslim grooming gangs. Can Mike Tapp tell us why Labour doesn't want one? What are they afraid of? What are they hiding? Should have asked him about that, Gary. I'm afraid there wasn't time. On this Andrew Tate story as well, this is the major teaching union, NASUWT, saying there's a pernicious and very worrying influence of Andrew Tate and other influencers. Andrew Tate, message from Michelle in South Shields. She says, morning Peter, please read this out. It so annoys me when Andrew Tate is blamed for the young people being influenced today. It's clearly bad parenting. These days parents are so happy to let their kids be brought up by phones as they haven't got a clue what they are up to. So easy to put the blame in the likes of Andrew Tate, says Michelle. And Tony, I think on that point as well, says what is happening to this country is the middle class is so full of hate for themselves and our country because of the decades of indoctrination of left-wing schools and universities along with workplaces. They're enacting what they think will cleanse their souls, and it is the working class white people who are paying the price, says Tony. Well, John in Woking has given me a ring. We're still on the debate desk, I should say, with Peter Barnes and Andy Williams. So John, you're not just talking to me, you're talking to Andy and Peter as well. We'll get their opinions, but tell us what's on your mind this morning, John.
I think that Mr. Tapp should be thanked, because that's just tens of thousands of more votes for reform. Utter nonsense that man came out with.
So one second, can you guys hear this?
Just about, yeah.
Okay, let me just turn this up a little bit. So you think it was utter nonsense what Mike Tapp was saying? Why do you disagree with what Mike Tapp said, John?
Well, the words he used, I mean, it's just lying. Nigel Farage is not a patriot.
He's talked about fake patriotism in Reform UK. You disagree with that, John, I would imagine?
100%.
Mm-hmm.
Nigel goes over to Normandy, to war graves on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. He goes to the battlefields. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're not a patriot, do you do things like that?
Yeah, I mean, Mike Tapp isn't here anymore, but his thought was certainly that Nigel Farage, in praising Putin, should be called a fake patriot for that reason.
Yeah, that's. I mean, no, that's nonsense.
Okay,
no.
Hold that thought just for a second, John. I'm just going to go to Andy and Peter. You've talked about this in the last few minutes, but just react to what John was saying there, Andy.
So as I say, I wouldn't say that Nigel Farage is not a patriot. I don't think patriotism is the only thing that drives him. I think that's one aspect. I think another is his ego. That is why we can see a huge split having emerged in Reform recently, because it's the Nigel Farage show, and it's always about Farage, fundamentally. The other thing I'd say is, while I wouldn't question their patriotism, I don't think Reform have the answers to the challenges we face. I think if you look at the way they talk about solving problems like
hold on, John. We'll come back to you in a second. Let's just let Andy have his say, and then I promise you'll come back.
I'll be quick. If you look at something like the small boats crisis, for example, and the way Reform position how they would tackle that, everything's really easy. We could just we'd solve that on day one. Very Trump-style rhetoric, and I don't think they've demonstrated yet that they have serious answers. To
Although
the really
interestingly, Reform are saying that in Wales, for example, they're eyeing up perhaps being in power there, Peter. That could show some demonstration of what they can do in office rather than as an opposition party.
Yeah, I think that's 100% correct. The one thing Reform lack is a kind of basis to say, look, we've achieved this, we've done this. They're very good at talking. I will agree with Andy on that, and I do think that one of the main drivers of Nigel Farage is his ego. Reform is the Nigel Farage show.
But you think he's a patriot? I do too, actually.
Of course he is. Yeah, but one thing that has annoyed me is this kind of, any kind of criticism of the UK, you're then anti-patriotic. We've got to allow some nuance. We've got to have a broader debate. This kind of, Britain is brilliant, Britain is wonderful. Well, do you know what? There are some things that aren't really wonderful, and we have to talk about them. And we can't just keep demonising and name-calling, which is basically what we're doing. People that just happen to have a different opinion. It's a bit childish, really.
Let's hear John's reaction to that. John, I promised I'd bring you back in. What do you think of what Andy and Peter have said?
Well, it's more what I think. Nigel wants us out of the ECHR. Totally agree. He wants to get Brexit done. Totally agree. He wants to raise the income tax threshold to over 20,000. Totally agree. And then not paying the banks back all this. Is it 35 billion?
I'm not sure of the number you're referring to, John.
It's a sizable amount of money that the government is paying the banks back for bailing them out. And no other country does this, but ours do.
Yeah.
There's lots of things that Reform want to do. You know, when he drove onto the stage in Birmingham last week, when he had the JCB, did you see that?
Yeah, I did, yeah. A very powerful image, yeah.
Yeah, because the numpties in the Labour Party and the Conservative Party want to repair holes in our roads, which is a national disgrace. But he wants to use JCBs with this new way of doing it.
Yeah. We're going to talk about potholes tomorrow, John. John there in Woking, absolutely not Woking. Andy, I think you had a point to make?
Just very quickly, I mean, I think the income tax threshold point that was raised there is a classic example of Reform not being serious about policy.
Yeah.
We're going to raise the income tax threshold to 20k. Lovely, it'd be great if everyone was taken out of tax to 20k. So that's £8,000 for, I think, 33 million working people. It's something like, and I'd need to check, about 260 billion a year.
So you think it's unrealistic?
Yeah, it's completely unrealistic.
Of course it is. This is the one thing. Reform talk a good game, but they have no policies, and the policies, and I use that term very loosely, have no backing to them. There's nothing there. It is a shell.
Well, listen, we frequently have Reform on this station, and we will ask them about their policies, certainly as time goes on, absolutely no doubt about that. But yes, Peter and Andy are reacting to that statement by Mike Tapp earlier on this morning called Nigel Farage a fake patriot. What do you think about that? 0344 499 1000. Let's talk about Donald Trump. Let's talk about the trade. Well, we talked a little bit about the trade deal, but he's suggested now that there could be a state visit in September. Andy, will your flag be up?
I'm not going to be out on the streets sort of welcoming him with open arms, but equally I'm not going to be out there protesting either. Look, I think this is a smart, sensible thing to do by the government. You know, how do you deal with building a relationship with a narcissist where you fan his ego? You know, oh, you're the first ever president to have 2 state visits. One of the great things about the monarchy is that people all over the world love it, respect it and envy it for whatever reason. And I think Starmer and the government are just using a tool they have at their disposal, which is the monarchy. Trump loves the monarchy, loves the king, loved the Queen, the late Queen, and I think he'll be chuffed, and it might help us to smooth over the relationship.
The reality is that they've got to use something to smooth over the relationship, because Starmer's proven himself to become wholly ineffective with dealing with the Americans. The tariffs,
I don't think that's true.
The tariffs, he completely failed on. We weren't even at the lowest one. You know, we're supposed to have this special. No, we weren't. That we were at the base level. There were countries below us that had a smaller tariff rate.
The point, I agree with Peter, and I'll tell you why. Because we were told, the White House said, if you essentially behave yourself, if you don't put reciprocal tariffs, you will be rewarded. The EU, for example, was at 20%. They didn't do reciprocal tariffs, went down to 10%. We're just in the same position as we were at the start. There's been no benefit for that at all.
Not yet, but I actually think if you look at the way we have, the way Johnny Reynolds has negotiated with his counterparts in the US, the way we've built the relationship in general, I think, David Lammy building a relationship with J.D. Vance, where they have absolutely nothing in common politically. I think they've done.
Why does that work? How does that work?
Well, what we haven't done is suffered yet at the hands of the Trump.
We got 10% tariff. We're suffering.
Well,
6.5 billion was withheld by Jaguar Land Rover.
Every country in the world has had.
But we're still suffering. You can't say we're not suffering. We are suffering.
Sorry. Okay, that is a fair point. But we're not suffering more than anyone else. We have managed an incredibly Trump is a disaster, okay? Let's be absolutely clear about it. The tariffs thing are economically illiterate. Nobody who knows the first thing about economics in the world will tell you that this is a good idea. Elon Musk doesn't think this is a good idea. The stock market's tanked, right? And the people who this is going to hurt in the end actually are poor and lower middle income American people.
Yeah, that I do agree
with. Prices are going to be going up.
Final word from Peter.
I do agree with that, but let's actually look at what Starmer's been able to achieve with the Americans. It's the complete sum all of nothing. You know, we're supposed to have this special relationship. Well, that blew up the minute he put David Lammy as foreign secretary, who called him a white supremacist. You know, let's be real. The reason that we've had to roll out the royal family is because of this Labour government's childish comments about him back in the first term. It's ridiculous to argue otherwise.
We're going to go to a break. break, but just before I do, I want to read out this out from Vincent in North Yorkshire. He says, "Who is Mike Tapp? Never heard of him, and like other Labour MPs, he will be out the first moment the country are able to vote. Nigel Farage is our only hope. The destruction of our country by this government cannot be due to incompetence. It has to be by design," says Vincent in North Yorkshire. Lots of other comments coming in, calls as well. We'll be back in the debate desk with Peter and Andy in just a second. Stay with us here on Talk.
Labour now are in turmoil and very split on this, whether or not to back this sort of radical unpeddling of some of the sort of, more pernicious things that have been put into place. Do you have any sympathy with the Labour Party over this?
Well, I think we need to hear some leadership from Keir Starmer on this. It's one thing to say we'll note the judgment, but what is the government, what is the Labour Party in power going to actually do about this?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch, including Paul, who sent a voice note.
Good morning, Peter. Happy Easter. Your two contributors at the moment are both slating off Reform and Nigel Farage and their economic policies. I'd like to point out that the policies of both the Labour and the Conservative Party have landed us with a near £3 trillion. That's £3,000 billion debt. So any lectures from Labour or the Conservatives on economics are to be treated with contempt. Thanks for a lovely show. Good morning.
Good morning, Paul. Thank you, and happy Easter to you. Peter, what do you make of that?
Yeah, that's perfectly fine, but two things can be wrong at the same time. So don't get me wrong, I'm not going to sit here and say that the Tories are wonderful. I'm not going to say Labour are brilliant. But Reform's policies are either non-existent or also wrong. You know, this is the thing. I really hate this in our politics, where if you're not this, then you have to be that. Yeah. Two things can be wrong at the same time.
Well, we certainly probe Reform UK on this station on a number of occasions, and we'll certainly talk about their economic policy very soon. Andy, your thoughts on this?
I expect if Reform got into government, which they won't, by the way.
Do you not think they'll get into government, even as part of an agreement or a coalition with the Conservatives?
No, because if the Tories go into coalition with Reform, they're finished. And Labour would never go into coalition with Reform. So I just don't think it's possible to go into government. But if they did, I expect what they would do is embark upon a sort of like Singapore-on-Thames libertarian style experiment a la Liz Truss, and we all know how that went. The markets wouldn't stand it.
Well, they've been talking to Liz Truss actually for her advice on.
I know. I mean, what on earth does she have to offer anyone?
I'll agree with you on that one.
She wants to smash the globe, apparently. Lots on this story about the Andrew Tate phenomena, the surge in schools. Boys are refusing to speak, in some cases anyway, to female teachers. This is more than 5,800 teachers polled by the NASUWT, huge teaching union. I think it's Britain's biggest teaching union, actually. And nearly 3 in 5, 59%, said they believe social media use has contributed to deterioration in pupils' behaviour. One teacher said she'd had 10-year-old boys refusing to speak to her because she is a woman. Another teacher said the Andrew Tate phenomenon has had a huge impact on how pupils at an all-boys school interacted with females and males they did not see as masculine. Another respondent said the school had experienced some incidents of derogatory language towards female staff as a direct result of Andrew Tate videos. This is Andrew Tate videos. This is certainly off the back of the Prime Minister Keir Starmer hosting a discussion in Downing Street about adolescence, the big and popular and in many cases very controversial not a documentary. Keir Starmer originally said it was a documentary. It's a drama. It is fiction. And it explored incel culture. I've watched it, and indeed Kemi Badenoch was berated for not watching it, as if she somehow hates Britain by not watching a television programme. Andy, have you seen Adolescence, and what do you make of this Andrew Tate story that the NASUWT is talking about today?
I have seen Adolescence. I think it's a great drama. I'm not wild about the idea that we would make government policy off the back of a drama.
Mr. Bates was the person.
Post office was an exception, but that wasn't an exception because it obviously highlighted an issue that was long overdue being sorted. There is clearly something that is happening to young people, and I don't know whether it's particularly bad among young boys, possibly it is, where content they're seeing online is affecting the way they think and behave. And that's not just social media. I think pornography. You know, young people are accessing hardcore porn at a really young age. If you're a 10, 11-year-old boy and you're watching that sort of stuff, it's got to impact how you think about and see women.
Well, so I think it's before your body is even properly developing. Stuart has said the problem with children in schools has been created by abdication of parenting, laws preventing teachers sorting out bad behaviour, and weak headmasters who want to be friends with badly behaved children. Andrew and Thatcham says teaching unions will blame everyone else, but not what they have done to our education system, especially over COVID. I also agree with others, bad parenting is to blame, but that's a consequence of the unions, as most, if not all, of these unruly kids are born from parents who went through the education system under Tony Blair, which is where the issues started. Peter Barnes.
Yeah, I think this is a really complex issue that people are looking for simple solutions to or simple reasons for it. Like, Andrew Tate, for me, is a symptom, not the disease. You know, I think there is a much bigger issue with a society that turned around and said all men are rapists, you know, and they're basically abandoned young boys at an educational level, you know, decimated working class communities and working class jobs. You know, there is a lot to go here where men in our society have been blamed for a lot of its ills and have pulled away. And you sometimes wonder where this crisis of masculinity came from. It came from the very people that are now blaming Andrew Tate, who is a product of their actions. This is the thing. It's rather staggering to me, this adolescence obsession, because I would love it if we had the same kind of, you know, obsession over the nearly 250,000 girls that were raped by grooming gangs.
Yeah.
That, you know, this is the thing where Andrew Tate and social media are easy excuses. Well, pantomime villains.
People are asking the question, sort of saying, what does it take a huge and popular drama that government policy is being made? Your thoughts, Andy?
I just want to challenge one thing that a few of your listeners have written in on. I'm not saying this is not the case, but I think it's very easy for us to say, well, it's parenting, it's poor parenting, parenting's got worse.
Part of it.
Well, that may be, but I've not seen any evidence that parenting has got worse. I mean,
really?
Well, how do you measure that?
Well,
so anecdotally,
let me tell you. Okay, yes, right? Okay, this is anecdotal, but listen, every teacher I know says, you think the kids are bad? Try the parents.
Yeah, because I think this also stems from a bigger problem in our society, that we don't take education seriously enough. Most teachers are seen as glorified babysitters these days. I think that is a huge problem. The reason I think teachers see so much stress and so much work is the parents, and I do think they need to step up. I am sick to death of them saying, oh, it's social media. Well, there There are ways to control your kid on social media. There are tools that many internet providers have now. Step up. You know, that is the thing that really annoys me in this debate.
I agree with that. And the other thing I think is really important is the big tech companies have responsibility here. It's not all their fault. I'm not saying that Mark Zuckerberg has sort of, you know, ruined an entire generation of people's brains, but companies like Meta and Google and others do have a responsibility to make sure that you know, violent or hateful content is not available on their platforms, full stop.
I want to talk a little bit about what I want to talk about. I want to talk about Britain's most dangerous criminals who are in prison at the moment, and often they are radicalising other people in prisons, people who go in as you know, an armed robber and then come out as a terrorist, essentially. We've seen a big attack by Hashim Abedi, one of the Manchester bombers, in HMP Franklin recently as well. The problem of Islamisation in prisons and radicalisation in prisons, I just wonder how big a problem you think this is, Peter.
I think it's a significant problem, and we haven't dealt with it, or we've kind of refused to deal with it. What I wonder, why are there so many foreign prisoners here? Deport them, get rid of them. Well, not only do we save some money, but we have the potential to stop radicalisation.
The one thing, and this isn't the biggest issue in regard to that, and I agree with you, we should be deporting foreign criminals, but if you're a murderer and you're sent to a country that you're from originally, are you actually going to serve your sentence? That's what I want to know. Are you going to be banged up properly and actually serve your sentence? That's what I worry about a little bit.
I think the prison system in general clearly is not working, right? Why do we send people to prison? For two reasons. One is to punish them and as a deterrent to prevent people from, you know, to deter people from committing crimes. But the second has to be to rehabilitate them. If the prison system is working properly, people come out better educated, having accepted and understood what they did wrong, and not wanting to do that again. But reoffending rates are through the roof.
We've got the worst in Europe, I think.
Is that right? Yeah. Okay. So and we saw when we had to release about 1,500 prisoners last summer because there were no prison places left in the country, we saw a big wave of reoffending from those people. So it's you know, clearly the system is not working if reoffending rates are the highest in Europe.
That's because in 2012 we gutted the probation services. I think we're dealing with the consequences of that. You cannot take somebody out, put them in prison and just say off you go, when we have a society that will not hire ex-cons. You know, like we have nothing to kind of ease them back into societal life so they go back to crime. You're kind of setting them up for failure, and you then wonder where the radicalisation comes from. It's because there is no prospects for them. The greatest kind of percolator or incubator, for radicalisation is economic desperation. You see it right around the world where there is no economic hope. Radicalisation grows because you can blame something else. You say you're not doing well because of that, and that is the real problem here. You cannot expect somebody to have been locked away for 2-3 years or something and then try and get a job. Impossible. You know, you put them on these incredibly difficult licenses, you know, that most people can't even do, let alone somebody who might be a drug addict or something. You're setting people up for failure. Don't get me wrong, I think prisons should be a lot tougher than they are, but you've got to give and take. Very interesting you mentioned the probation service there. That of course happened under Chris Grayling, and I for one am shocked that something Chris Grayling did hasn't really worked out. When I was
exceptional cabinet minister.
When I was now Lord Grayling to you, peer of the realm.
What doesn't that say everything about this country?
I was a special advisor in the Ministry of Justice for 6 months, and someone came in and told me about something that had gone wrong that I needed to kind of clear up behind the scenes, and I said, oh, another feeling Grayling policy, and went, no, it's Liz Truss this time. I said, oh, refreshing change. Refreshing change. Trevor in Harrow says, good morning, Peter. How convenient for them to blame Andrew Tate for this situation. I blame it on a culture we've imported that has no respect for women, yet the left cannot bring themselves to say it. Jerry says the UK has deteriorated substantially since the late 1990s. The cost of living, infrastructure, crime, health and education, with the Tories and Labour in charge. Why should we vote for either of them, says Jerry. And Brian says Nigel Farage oozes patriotism. It's just a scared defence from those who question his love and defence of this country. As a 71-year-old on a state pension plus a very small private annuity, I was below the tax threshold. Now my rise in state pension is now lost due to the freezing of personal tax allowances, and I am now £9 a week worse off. That's £9 I cannot spend on heating and other basic needs. I'm the wrong age, the wrong colour, the wrong nationality. I absolutely despise this government and cannot wait for the day reform move into number 10. I will go back to Andy and Peter just for a final thought, but I just want to play a quick voice note from Ian on reform. Let's play what Ian has to say.
Morning, Peter. It's Ian from Nottingham. I hope you're well. Great show as always. I've just got a message for the two panellists who are intent on trying to undermine reform. Sorry, fellas, if I'm allowed to call you that. Reform are coming. Change is coming. We, the population, have woken up to the crap and lies for years. This government is going to be out.
Thank you, Ian. You're allowed to call them fellas. I'm fairly sure you're both happy with that description. Sure, we haven't even got into that issue this morning, although it's been a dominant one. We talked about it a lot on my programmes on Thursday and Friday. Just a reaction to that, Andy. Final thought?
I've got really bad news for Ian, which is that Reform are never going to be in government. I'm sorry, Ian. It's not going to happen. Not in a million years.
Let's see what happens.
I bet you every penny I have, which is not a lot, but I would bet a large amount of money that they will never be in government. And just one quick thing. There's something really interesting with Farage, the cultish way people talk about him.
It's not a cult.
It's just like Corbyn. It's just
similarities between a Corbyn.
No, I disagree with that completely.
I call them Faragist.
Everyone call him, Jeremy. It's the same. Nigel.
Okay. Listen, I think just a very 10 seconds.
No, I completely agree. The similarities between the Corbynistas and the Faragists are it's obvious.
They find him an inspiring leader.
Individual.
They found Corbyn an inspiring leader.
Do I find Jeremy Corbyn?
No, they did. They did.
No. I just find him an anti-Semite. See you in court, Jeremy. Peter Barnes is a political strategist. Andy Williams, a political commentator. They've joined me on the debate desk this morning. Thank you both very, very much indeed. We're going to take some of your calls. I think we have to after the break. We're also going to talk to Mary Dejevsky about Ukraine. Lots to discuss. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Get your points across. A lively morning.
You said you don't like Polish people and you don't trust them.
That's not what I said.
Yes, that's what you said.
No. You must have misheard me. I like Polish people a lot.
Christ me, I never heard of this from you. I've heard this on the radio.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. You want to have a listen? Have a listen to what I said. Okay. Listen to this. I don't like Poles. I wasn't talking about Polish people.
Yes.
I was talking about polls. You know, when you do a poll to find out what people think. You know, like they say 55% of people vote Remain, 45% vote Leave. That's a poll. I wasn't talking about...
but later on you said you don't trust them, so you don't...
I don't trust them. No, that's true. I don't trust polls, and I don't like polls because I don't trust them. But that's not Polish people.
No, that's what I thought. That's what I pick up.
Oh, I'm terribly sorry. Listen, well, I would never say anything like that.
No, so in this case, I never learned English.
No, listen, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. I'm very glad you called in because I wouldn't want you walking around thinking that Mike Graham is a horrible bigot. He doesn't like Polish people.
No, I was thinking, what the hell? What's going on here? Actually, I'm actually back and explain a few things.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk. It's been a lively morning so far. If you missed the last hour, it's well worth watching back on YouTube, maybe a little bit later on. We're going to talk about Ukraine in just a second. Mary Dejevsky is going to guide us through it, as she often does, the columnist and former correspondent in Moscow. What's actually going to happen? Are troops going to be deployed there? What is happening with this peace deal? There's lots to discuss. There's a lot to discuss on Andrew Tate as well. There are many teachers that are saying that Andrew Tate is the person who is making sure that children, including 10-year-old boys, aren't speaking even to female teachers. We'll talk about the care system. Loads of carers watch and listen to this programme. They contact me all the time and are very, very welcome to do so, and can do so this morning on 0344 499 1000. The government says it's going to sort social care. It's done very little on it so far. We're going to talk to the executive chairwoman of the National Care Association. We'll get the latest on the Easter travel chaos and the problems in our prisons as well. Convert or get hurt. That is what Islamist gangs, they're terrorising staff in those high security prisons. We'll talk all about that as well. And the comments from Mike Tapp, the MP for Dover and Deal, a little bit earlier on, who said Nigel Farage and Reform UK are, as he put it, fake patriots. What do you think about that? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, and many people have already this morning. Keep them coming in. We'll play out as many as we can between now and 1 o'clock. The voice notes, the WhatsApp text messages and the phone calls 0344 499 1000. We'll go to the phone calls in just a second, then we'll talk to Mary Dejevsky. Stay with us here on Talk. Grace is in London and is a caller who has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. I think Andrew Tate is something you want to talk about, Grace. You're very welcome to the programme.
Hi, and happy Easter to you.
Happy Easter.
I think that, as your contributors have said, he's a symptom of a wider problem, and the wider problem definitely includes pornography, which, so far as I understand, and I've seen any of it, includes a lot of violence now.
Yes.
And that's a serious contributing factor that maybe people aren't serious enough about cracking down on. But the fact that Andrew Tate is a symptom of a problem and not the whole problem doesn't mean that he shouldn't be opposed. And I do think that footage I've seen of him saying things that incite violence does mean that...
Well, I'm sure he would deny inciting violence, but certainly what we have heard from the NASUWT is that one teacher said she had 10-year-old boys refusing to speak to her because she is a woman. She argues as a direct consequence of what Andrew Tate says.
Well, it's hard to say if it's a direct consequence because I think it's a wider issue. But I have seen what happened between him and the women who are accusing him of rape. I don't know as an outsider, but I do
and
know
he denies all those charges. It must be said.
I do know what he has said on camera.
Sure.
And so those things are hugely problematic. But there is a wider problem, and for me, something I find striking is that. Particularly thinking about this weekend, is that for a long time in this country, we've had the idea, the aspiration that it's not simply the case that might is right. That had been what was believed by, the ancient Romans previously here in the Western world. That they thought it was fine to hurt women and to take what you could and be overbearing and dominant. But Jesus died on the cross and took death rather than standing up boldly and fighting against others. Because he loves humanity, he died in our place. And so for a while that influence, so though an awful lot of people haven't believed in that, I think there's a good historical case to believe in that, but though many people haven't, it shaped the values that we have, what we might call British values, to think we actually should be caring for others and be self-sacrificial. But we're losing that idea now, where we're going back towards the idea that might is right, that we should just take what we can, that men should dominate women if they can, that we should be as tough as we possibly can. And I think that is contributing to all sorts of problems, and Andrew Tate is a part of that.
Grace, those are really, really interesting thoughts. I'm going to think about this call a lot longer than just this moment, and you've made a number of very intelligent points, and I really thank you for them. That is Grace in London. Thank you for that. I think we have another call, do we? We've just, the line has gone dead. I'll come back to Chris in Hereford if we can a little bit later on, but I want to talk to Mary Dejevsky now, who's a columnist and former correspondent in Moscow. This is about the Kremlin responding after the US has threatened to move on if no progress is made in peace talks. We know certainly that Marco Rubio, who is the Secretary of State, has said that, listen, if progress isn't made fairly soon, it's time to move on. Mary Dejevsky is with us, and it's a pleasure to see you, as always, Mary. What do you make of Marco Rubio's comments and the fact that the Kremlin has responded to them?
Well, I think on the one hand, it's a positive thing that the Kremlin is actually engaging with what the Americans are saying. I think it's worth remembering that a couple of months ago, there would have been no communication whatever between Moscow and Washington. So I think, that needs to be chalked up as a bit of an achievement. Marco Rubio's comments were very, very interesting. And what is so difficult to figure out is how far what he said and also what Trump said later in the day, how far that is brinkmanship, how far it's designed to try and knock heads together to make a ceasefire or talks towards the end of the Ukrainian war to happen, and how far it is actually the Americans really staging a tantrum and saying we'll get out if there's no further progress. And I don't know which one of those the interpretation should be.
And it is a really interesting question. I mean, if you don't know, Mary, how are we meant to know? That's the question I ask. How determined do you think Trump actually is to get a solution here? He said previously, I'm going to sort this in 24 hours. It's taken a long time. Is this just his relatively short attention span, do you think? Or is this perhaps just a realisation that they're perhaps on a hiding to nothing? I mean, what's your thought on that?
I think that, I may be absolutely wrong, but I think that Trump is really, really serious about trying to end this war and to end the fighting. He is about the only national level politician anywhere to talk about the human cost of this war. And that's what he says continually, that he's trying to stop. And I actually think he's right about that. And he's also, it has to be said that his first term, he was right in saying that there were no new wars started during his term as president. Yeah. And I think, it may be a strange thing to say, but I think he can be seen, in a sense, as an anti-war president.
I agree with you, Mary. I think he's an anti-war president. I think if Barack Obama had opened up talks with North Korea, he'd have got another Nobel Peace Prize. Let's remind ourselves what Marco Rubio said on the US ready, perhaps, to abandon its efforts on Ukraine. This is Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State in America, essentially their foreign secretary. This is what he said yesterday.
I think it's important to remind everybody that the Ukraine war is a terrible thing, but it's not our war. We didn't start it. The United States has been helping Ukraine over the last 3 years, and we want it to end. And so we've talked about outlines of both sides. I thought we had positive meetings yesterday. Obviously, the Ukrainians have to go back home. They have to run it by their president. They have to take into account, their views on all of this, and we hope to hear back from them very soon. So if they're serious about peace, either side or both, we want to help. If it's not going to happen, then we're just going to move on.
Mary, do you think this America First idea is almost an isolationist position? Is this America saying, it's not our war, we didn't start it, actually, maybe it's not very much to do with us?
I tend to look at it slightly differently, that I think the Americans are less retreating into isolationism than they are, as they would see it, defending their interests in terms of the American zone of interest. I think that's what gets us to things like Greenland. It gets us to deportations of illegal migrants south of the border. It's about a zone and a sphere of influence that is American, that it's not European and it's not Asian, except insofar as America sees its own defensive interests. So I don't think it's isolationist, but I think it's American-centred.
It's interesting as well that the United States have begun, according to Iranian media, a second round of indirect nuclear talks in Rome with Iran, and the foreign minister of Iran, Abbas Araghchi, says leads the Iranian delegation. Steve Witkoff, of course, a very important negotiator from the American side, heading the US team. Do you think there could be any progress made here, Mary? Because this is something that America seems to be turning its attention to as well.
Well, yes, and I think, you know, in a way, it's unfortunate that this has really taken such a sort of marginal position in the news, because when the first round took place last week, this was a huge departure, because the Americans and the Iranians basically hadn't been talking since the Islamic Revolution. You're talking, you know, best part of half a century where there've been no diplomatic relations between the Americans and the Iranians, and suddenly we're getting talks on nuclear questions that may take us back into an Iranian nuclear agreement. Now, you know, I actually think that the time may actually be right for this, and in some ways it may be positive that it's out of the news, unlike Ukraine.
Yes.
Can I just add a couple of things?
Go ahead. Of course, Mary. Yeah.
There are two sort of things happening on either side of this. One of them is this very strange development of the minerals and rare earths agreement between the Americans and the Ukrainians, which, again, you know, I find it very hard to interpret. Is this Ukraine really mortgaging its future in quite a humiliating way, giving the Americans quite a lot of control over its resources, or is this something that is genuinely of mutual interest that benefits Ukraine by giving the Americans an economic interest, at least, in Ukraine? The other aspect that I think, you know, we've almost forgotten in this is that the talks on Thursday, which Rubio was actually talking about, were between Europeans and the Americans. The first time they've been talking about Ukraine directly since Trump came into the White House. Now, the Europeans, from my perspective, have really spent the last 2 months doing their utmost to undermine and sabotage the American peace efforts between Ukraine and Russia. They have been talking about, well, they've actually extended sanctions against Russia, where the Americans have talked about maybe lessening them. They've talked about continuing and upping their weapons supplies, their military support, their economic support to Ukraine. This is a direct contradiction of what the Americans are trying to do. And I don't know whether they sorted anything out at the Paris talks. There are going to be follow-up talks this week in London where things may become clearer again. But the fact that these talks that have not yet happened seriously between the Russians and the Ukrainians, the fact that these have not been happening is at least partly the responsibility of the Europeans, who've really been doing their utmost to try and prevent an agreement, because they say this is not the right time.
Mary, thank you for your thoughts. That's Mary Dejevsky there, columnist and former correspondent in Moscow. She knows of what she speaks. Lots of people getting in touch, not least about Mike Tapp's interview. That was an hour ago. Lots of people saying, Barry says, if you have taken part in Operations Corporate Granby and Banner and are a supporter of Reform UK, according to Mike Tapp, past intelligence corps, you're a fake patriot, says Barry. In fairness, I think he was talking about Reform UK politicians being fake patriots, but even so, we have quite a reaction to that, let me tell you. I think I've counted 10 voice notes that we have ready to play. We will play them throughout the programme, of course, and another person, Peter Darren, who's a market trader in Suffolk, David Bull's area, apparently. Very interesting from him. He says, if that idiot Andy Williams, I'm sure Andy Williams would deny being an idiot, is so confident that Reform won't win, how about he has a £10,000 bet with me, because I'm more than confident Reform will knock these Labour liars out, says Peter. Matt in Cheshire, I think, wants to make a bet with Andy Williams as well. Matt has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Matt, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, good morning, Peter.
Good morning.
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter.
Yeah, I'll definitely take that bet. I think it was an open-ended bet as well.
I think we perhaps calm down from the 10,000 position. I don't want to encourage people to make £10,000 bets. But what I did actually with a listener previously, Claire in the World, and in fairness to Claire, she fronted it up. We said we would pay £10 to a charity of the other person's choice. So do we have Andy on the line? And Andy Williams has left the building, but he's on the line. Hello, Andy.
Hi.
Hi there. Andy, a number of people have contacted us to say they want to take you up on your offer of a bet about whether reform will be in the government. Matt is on the line, and he says that Matt, how much would you like to bet, Andy? Can we keep it to like reasonable figures, maybe like £10 or something?
I'll contribute £10 to the charity that will need it the most, which will be the Labour coffers after the election.
Andy, will you take the bet with Matt? Will you give £10 to a charity or an organisation of Matt's choice if Reform UK become part of the government after the 2029 election?
Absolutely. I'm happy to call it 50 if you'd like.
Let's stick to. I tell you what. Let's stick to 10. Everybody, calm down. We're not Rishi Sunak and Piers Morgan here. Okay. Let's just keep it reasonable. So, Matt, is that agreeable to you?
That's fine. Can I just point out, Peter, in my area, it's been a Labour seat for 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan Reynolds' seat. Next door is Angela Rayner's seat. 6 weeks ago, there was some polling, a poll of 7,000 people. And I rang the company to ask them the individual polling for my constituency, and Angela Rayner's Reform are polling at 47% and Labour are polling at 23%.
Okay. It'll be very interesting to see. Matt, listen, thanks for your thoughts. Andy, just finally, are you surprised that there's been such a reaction to this, that there's so many people who are saying that you're wrong, that Reform UK won't be part of the government?
I think the problem with what your caller's saying is that the poll, I'm not dismissing the polling that he cited, but that would have to be replicated across 326 constituencies. And I just do not believe that there is sufficient depth of support for reform, breadth and depth. I do not see it. I mean, I may be proved wrong. I just think it's highly unlikely. And the other thing is that Reform has proved itself to be such a dysfunctional party, it's not even been able to keep its band of 5 MPs together. I think it's inconceivable that they could be sufficiently organised to win a general election.
Well, we will see. Andy, thanks for coming back on the line. That was Andy Williams, who was on the debate desk a little earlier. He's left the building, but he took up Matt's challenge. We're keeping it at £10. I don't want to get into, huge amounts of money and people losing money, and the £10,000 offer, I think we will politely perhaps decline that one. But Matt in Cheshire has that little wager with Andy. So we'll see in 2029 if I'm still on this station at that stage. We will make sure that we get them back on air together to make sure the debt is settled. We're going to play some voice notes after the break. We're also going to talk about care in this country, because the government still hasn't held an all-party meeting on social care 4 months on from Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary's announcement of a commission aimed at building agreement between the main parties. Care in this country, the NHS is on its knees, but care has fallen over, and we're going to talk to the the executive chairman of the National Care Association, that's Nadra Ahmed CBE, who will be on in just a second. Stay with us.
find it very difficult to listen to them. They are not doing their country much of a service by the way they're conducting themselves.
Just for people who might not know, Steve Witkoff, of course, the negotiator who's dealing with this on Trump's behalf. Yeah.
I mean, they are coming out with some infantile nonsense, and that interview from Rubio just now is not our war, we didn't start it. I mean, yeah, we know that, but there's right and wrong here. I do think the Americans under this administration were at best naive and actually just incredibly boastful, or Trump was.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
What I want to say is something very important. That is that Louise Rhodes is 21 today. She is the daughter of Tech Up Dave, and he is feeling very old today, but a very happy 21st birthday to Louise Rhodes, who is 21 today. Many, many happy returns. I hope you have a lovely Easter and a lovely birthday as well. I think perhaps some sort of theme park visit might be in order from her and Tech Up Dave. They're huge fans of theme parks. Perhaps they'll be going to the new one in Bedford that is going to be created in a number of years' time. But Louise, happy birthday to you. Lots of people getting in touch on the Mike Tapp interview. That was about an hour ago. Mike Tapp is, of course, the Labour MP for Dover and Deal. Kelvin?
That guy you've just got on there from the Labour Party, he says the inherited open borders. Well, this party opened the borders up in the first place. I mean, Tony Blair. So how can he say that? It's like they say, oh, we inherited a £22 billion black hole, which there wasn't one, but if there was, that £22 billion black hole was from the time they were in, when they left. Was it 88 billion black hole they left? So it's part of that, and they're moaning about inheriting their own, disasters. You couldn't make it up, could you? Bye.
Calvin, thanks for your thoughts. Appreciate that. Pete has a voice note as well. Let's hear what Pete has to say.
Oh, hi, Pete. It's Pete from Manchester. Great show. Just been listening to your interview with your guest, Mike Tapp. What a complete load of rubbish he's spouting. I wish someone would get to the bottom of the truth of this £22 billion black hole. Labour won't give us a list, give us itemisation of exactly what it consists of, because the OBR are saying that it doesn't exist. There's nothing to back it up, and that seems to be the general consensus. And the other thing I noticed from the interview, typical Labour, slagging off everybody else but won't accept any responsibility themselves. Also, you can just tell by the way he's going on, they are terrified of reform. They know that they're doing absolutely abysmally, and reform are going to give them such a kicking in the ballots. And I did say ballots. Great show. Cheers. Bye.
You certainly did say ballots. Never mind the ballots. Thank you very much for that. I agree with an awful lot of that. Let's hear from another Pete.
I love you to bits, Peter, and I think your shows are great, but I wish you'd be a bit harder on some of these MPs. I'd like you to start using the L word, you know that word, liar, for some of these MPs that are just spouting total rubbish. You need to go a bit harder, but great show. Really enjoy what you do. Thanks, mate.
Pete, thanks. I will take that on board, and I'm very happy to hear from people who disagree with me. I have a slightly different interviewing style to perhaps some other people, but listen, all criticism, all praise, all views, always welcome. 0344 499 1000. And one thing I know a lot of people really, really care about, no pun intended, is the issue of care. And a very senior person in the NHS said to me a few years ago that the NHS is on its knees, but care has fallen over. And there are a lot of people worried about the fact that the care system, these are carers who are either people who are going into people's homes to care for people like my granny, for example, before she died about 18 months ago. Great people came in, 4 times a day, not paid a huge amount of money, very, very good people. And West Streeting announced a commission aimed at building agreement between the main parties, essentially saying that the care system needs to be sorted out with all the parties working together. It can't be a sort of adversarial idea. The whole thought of maybe even a kind of royal commission or something like that. Well, if you're a carer, if you're someone who's cared for, I want to hear from you today, 0344 499 1000. But before that, I want to speak to Nadra Ahmed, CBE, who is the Executive Chairwoman of the National Care Association. Nadra, thank you for joining me this morning. I really appreciate you taking the time. I just wonder if you could paint a picture for me of where care is in this country. Do you agree with my NHS contact who said that care has fallen over in this country?
Good morning. Yes, it has fallen over, and sadly, there is nothing to give it a helping hand to stand up again. And I think that's the challenge that we have. And the impact of that is being felt. We've got 500,000 people waiting for assessments in social care. We've got over 4 million people who are unpaid carers. They're looking after loved ones because the state is failing. It's failing them all the time. And I think the challenge we now have is there's an increased need for social care, but the prioritisation done by this government, which we had huge hopes that they would come up with some solutions, has just knocked it back time and time again. And the latest of that is being demonstrated by the increase in the national insurance contributions for employers, which has put another 2 billion hole on top of the 8 billion that already existed.
There are many care workers who our viewers and listeners will point out who perhaps left caring because of vaccine mandates, for example. That's not something I particularly want to get into, but I do know that a lot of the rights and wrongs of that, I feel quite strongly that people shouldn't have been forced to get the vaccine. I got all my jabs, I'm totally jabbed up, and I think it's something that I was glad to receive. Other people feel very differently. But nonetheless, the end result of that was the case. It seems to me anyway, and I've read a bit about this, that a number of people left the caring profession. Numbers are clearly an issue. Money is clearly an issue. If West Streeting was in front of you right now, what would you say to him, Nadra?
Well, he has been in front of me, and I've told him to be more honest about what's happening. I've actually been very clear that we've got to stop pretending that we're supporting social care when we're not. Social care only comes up on the agenda of any politician about election time, and then it sort of drops again.
Why is it the Cinderella issue? It's clearly such a huge issue for so many people. We've got a population that's getting older. Nobody can argue it's not going to get worse as a problem. Why is it such a problem that you think politicians just don't want to touch?
Well, I think because they tell me, and they tell me consistently, that it's not in their post bags. They don't get huge numbers of letters because the only people who appreciate social care are those who have to draw on it. It only matters when it matters, and that's the issue here. With the NHS, we all know and we love it because when you need it, you know it's there. There's a building there you'll go to, and you'll be able to access it. With social care, it only matters when you get to a stage. And social care is not only about older people; it's about people with mental health, people with learning disabilities. It goes across so many genres of age, and yet it only matters to the public when it matters because it's means tested, because it's not free at the point of access. People think it is, and I don't think people appreciate it. You talked about a family member. I had both my parents had to draw on the social care system. They were fortunate enough to not be in a position where they could pay for it. But there are lots and lots of people. We're creating this two-tier system, and the politicians find it a subject that they will talk about. We had 3,500 people go into London, into Westminster to talk to for the first time, totally unprecedented, that people felt so strongly that social care was being ignored. Everybody else has been exempt who works with the public services. Social care, although we look after people who are publicly funded, it's going to affect the provider sector. And this cross-party stuff, well, where is it? Where on earth is it? We've got a parliament here. Let's be completely honest. They have a majority where they just don't need anybody.
Yeah.
They'll talk about the cross-party, but actually,
they could fix it. They could fix it tomorrow. They could fix it tomorrow. And any government, and especially a government with a majority that size, that says this is a complicated issue, it's going to take time, they're going to take issues. I say, look at the blast furnace in Scunthorpe issue. Last Saturday, they got their act together. They recalled Parliament. They put through a bill within a day. That is possible. There were 411 MPs elected for Labour. They can solve this problem, can't they? They can solve it.
Absolutely, and you've actually picked up an issue that I wrote about quite a lot last weekend, because I was devastated on the day that the employers' national insurance was being debated in Parliament. The vast majority of Labour MPs were not there. Whether this was a three-line whip not to be there because they all had to vote with government, I don't know. It was an empty chamber, something that affects over 1 million people. We have 1.7 million people working in social care. This is such an important subject. And yet the Labour Party MPs were missing. I think it's a disgrace. Why were they missing on that day? And then on a Saturday, the week that the Easter break starts, they all came back.
Yeah, well, they were told to, in fairness, Nadra, but yeah. No,
absolutely.
Listen, it's a perfectly reasonable issue. Let's talk again, Nadra. Really great to talk to you. Nadra Ahmed there, CBE, Nardra is how you pronounce it, apologies. Nardra Ahmed, CBE, Executive Chairwoman of the National Care Association. Linda's been in touch with a voice note on this.
Hi Peter, Linda in London here. Just what you were talking about with carers, I think I am considered a carer for my husband, although I'm his wife, so I just see what I do as being his wife and being in a loving, committed relationship. However, I would fit that definition, and I think there's very little support available for carers. And I think that if we want to sort out the NHS, for example, we need to sort out social care. One of the biggest issues is that people are in hospital a lot longer than they need to be because the support and the facilities and the care isn't available. And we sort that out, and I think we will see some of the pressures in our hospitals being reduced. Thanks, Peter. Great show as always.
Great voice note, Linda, and all the very best to you and your husband. And that point about people getting out of hospital and being able to access care packages, that would just, it's all these blockages in the system, isn't it? It's about ambulance waiting times, it's about waiting times in A&E, it's about getting people into the beds and the wards, and then it's about getting people home when they're ready to go home. Well, is the care package there or is it not? A very good friend of mine recently had a problem. His father wasn't going to be discharged from hospital because the care package wasn't there, and that is something that so many families deal with when time goes on. Linda, great voice note, and thank you for it, and I wish you all the best in your care for your husband. I'm sure the whole family appreciates what you do for him, but as you say, it is, as you see it, certainly just your duty and your obligation, and certainly your love for him as a wife, and certainly when people say in sickness and in health, that's what it means. Debs has been in touch and says Mike Tapp, the MP, represents everything that is wrong with this Labour government. He and his Muppet show are finished, and he has just put another nail in the Labour coffin. Dave says, Peter, people saying you were soft in that interview, do they not realise you don't always need to be an aggressive interviewer to get them to dig their own grave? Great show, as always. Thank you, Dave. Sometimes silence is a very important weapon. Frank McGuinness found that out about 10 days ago, the lawyer for Hamas. There's lots more to discuss. We're going to talk in just a second about the Easter travel chaos. The doyen of travel journalism in this country, Simon Calder, will join us, and we're talking about converting or getting hurt, how Islamist gangs are terrorising staff in high security prisons, forcing non-Muslim inmates to join their ranks for protection. The authorities are losing control. We'll talk about all of that in just a second here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Maybe you're in a car right now on a journey for Easter. You're one of the car dwellers. Well, Simon Calder is the travel correspondent at The Independent. Let's get a view of what is happening this very, very busy Easter weekend. Simon, thanks for joining us. Let's go through all the different aspects of this. Let's start with the road, Simon. First of all, where are you? That looks almost nautical. Nautical, but nice.
It is, yes. Nautical, but nice. That's very good. I'm in beautiful Croatia in the city of Split, and I'm on the top deck of a boat which is shortly to set sail, and they're actually going to have the emergency briefing in a minute, so forgive me if I leave in some haste, but
I once interviewed people on the tall ships that go around the world, and there were two people who'd fallen in love during their sort of working on the tall ships, and I said, where's this relationship? I said on air, I said, where's this relationship going? Could it be wife on the ocean wave? Anyway, what's happening on the roads?
Okay, fine. On the roads of the UK, it's another grueling day, particularly if you are listening in your car. You're probably thinking, oh, crikey, getting towards Loon, and we've got massive problems with key motorways, in particular, of course, the M25, as always, from Gatwick, the M23 round to Heathrow, and up to the M40 going to Oxford and Birmingham. That's not going to be great. Neither is the Dartford crossing on the eastern side. Across the UK more generally, south from Birmingham, particularly south of Bristol towards Devon and Cornwall on the M5, and north on the M6 around, well, anywhere from kind of going past Manchester and Liverpool up to Preston, and then across to the turn off for Blackpool is always busy, not to mention the getting into and from the lakes. So those are where the squeezes are. But anywhere, particularly if you're kind of around the big cities, shopping areas, they are going to be very busy too, because people are doing their normal Saturday stuff, going to football, whatever, as well as it being a big holiday weekend. So good luck, everybody. If you possibly can, stay and listen and watch Talk, and then set off tea time, and you will have a nice, smooth journey.
And a lot of people, of course, trying to get out and about on the railways, knowing that Network Rail using this time, which is sometimes slightly quieter, to do quite a lot of railway repairs. So lots of disruption on the railways as well, Simon.
Absolutely, and really odd messaging from the government. So the Transport Secretary, Heidi Alexander, said, yeah, we are going to get rid of over 1,100 miles of roadworks. We're going to clear them down. We'll bring them back on Tuesday to allow everybody to have a smooth journey by road, or smoother. But meanwhile, they're closing down the southern end of the West Coast main line. That isn't going to be open till Tuesday. So London Euston all the way to Milton Keynes is closed. That's the line to the West Midlands, Northwest England, North Wales, southern Scotland. And, well, yes, rail replacement buses running between Milton Keynes and Bedford, where you can change for trains which will take you to London. So a bit bleak there, I'm afraid. However, better news, if I may, in the skies. You've probably seen reports of chaos predicted at Gatwick Airport because of a strike. That's members of the Unite Union working for a company called Red Handling. Well, so far this morning, I'm seeing zero impact from that. They handle the airlines Norwegian at Gatwick, going to Copenhagen, Bergen, Oslo, all those on time. Looking good on TAP Portugal as well to Lisbon and Porto, and also Air Peace to Lagos. So I imagine that all the managers have been called in on their weekend off, and the passengers aren't noticing a thing. One thing they are noticing, and you and I have talked about this, is restrictions on air traffic, particularly heading southeast from the UK, going to places like Croatia, as well as the Greek islands, Turkey, and so on. Lots of air traffic control staff shortage is responsible, and as a result of that, there are planes sitting on the ground right now at UK airports, Edinburgh, Manchester, Birmingham, Bristol, Gatwick, waiting to leave. When the captain said, sorry, we're going to be hanging around for half an hour, maybe an hour, because we've got to wait for permission to fly over France or Germany or Hungary or wherever.
Goodness me. Quick word on the ferries as well. Some delays, perhaps, to people maybe returning from France?
Very much so, very much so. So we're seeing smooth things at Dover today. It was a little bit sticky yesterday, some people waking up to 90 minutes because, of course, going over from Dover, you've got to go through French passport control, and they've got to have a look at and stamp your passport. Coming back from Calais, I think later on today and also tomorrow and Monday, there will be problems, and that's because you've got both French border control, they've got to stamp you out of the European Union. Then you go to the UK border force, they've got to get you into Britain. And obviously they're very concerned at the moment about dairy and meat products. So you could be told, we've got to... we're going to have to take a look and make sure you haven't got any of those cheese sandwiches.
Yes, indeed. Just briefly, Simon, or saucisson, just briefly, Simon, the Eurostar, there were some delays yesterday. Are they all cleared up? Are things back to normal there? Do you know?
Things seem to be running pretty normal now. Yeah, it's busy days, but it always is for Eurostar trains through the Channel Tunnel, but fairly normal so far. And let's hope that people have a smooth journey to where they're getting today, and more particularly get back. It's going to be a huge rush on Monday.
I was on the Eurostar a few days ago heading to France, and then came back on Wednesday lunchtime. And can I say, I think it's the first time I've got through being in the Channel Tunnel without singing Under the Sea from The Little Mermaid, which I think is quite an achievement. Simon, thank you. Appreciate that. That's Simon Calder there, travel correspondent from The Independent there. Let's play a couple more voice notes. Let's hear from Karen on the Mike Tapp interview. Lots of people getting in touch about this, is what Karen has to say.
Sorry, Peter, but I've just got to say something to Mike Tapp. What are they not getting? The country is at boiling point. They have to stop the illegal migrants now. We are angry. We've had enough. What is it they are not getting? What dark forces are at play behind them? This is getting serious. I am so angry at watching these migrants coming, getting put up in expensive hotels, getting given everything. Enough is enough. Tell him we've had enough.
Karen, thanks for your thoughts there. Let's hear from Dave.
Hi, Peter. Yeah, quick one while Mike Tapp's on. Regarding reform, I really don't think anyone cares. I don't care whether it's reform. I just want someone in to sort this absolutely ridiculous mess out. Well, Mike, your lot ain't doing much about it, are they? Hey?
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for your thoughts on that. We're going to go to a break now, but in just a minute we're going to talk to Will Geddes, who's an international security expert, about what's happening in our prisons. This is Islamist prisoners, like the one who threw boiling oil over three prison officers, actually, and stabbed them last weekend. Horrendous story. Well, now there's more evidence of Islamist gangs terrorising staff, even in those high-security prisons, and forcing non-Muslim inmates to join their ranks for protection, convert or get hurt. That's what they're saying. We'll take some of your calls as well. Do give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
was looking earlier about this new hub for counter-terrorism, which was built in 2021, and this is what police chiefs said about creating it. And they said, counter-terrorism threats are multiplying and the style of attack is changing. Organised crime grows more complex and demands new responses. There is an ongoing urgency to create this hub. Doing nothing is not an option. Doing nothing is not an option, but doing an Easter egg hunt is apparently an option.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to Brian saying he loved the debate desk earlier. Despite disagreeing with most of what they said, I think you could see the problem. They live in their own bubble and really don't understand the anger that is felt by millions around the country. We're very close to a tipping point. Keep up the good work, says Brian. Let's hear a voice note from Shirley.
Peter, it's Shirley from the Cotswolds. Peter, that guest of yours from the Labour Party, he needs to just talk to the wall because no one's listening. We're all living through the hash that Labour are doing to this country. And as for the Reform Party not saying what their manifesto is, well, Labour said nothing about theirs. They didn't answer any questions. They just stayed silent throughout, and they still won. I just hope that he's replaced by Reform, along with many, many other councils in the country. Thank you, Peter. Bye.
Thank you, Shirley. Glenn?
Morning, Peter. Glenn from Suffolk here. Do you know what? There's not one Labour MP that impresses me, and Mike Tapp has certainly not changed my mind. This is the man who represents a community on which the local beaches are letting in thousands and thousands of people a year. He says, oh, we inherited open borders from the Tories, but they've not done anything. It's getting worse. They've been in nearly a year. Have they smashed a single gang yet? My God. Have a good day.
Glenn, thanks for your voice note there. Thanks, Shirley, as well. Plenty more of those to come, let me tell you. They're coming in thick and fast. You can send a voice note or indeed give me a ring. We'll take more calls, of course, between now and 1 o'clock. 0344 499 1000. But I want to talk now about this idea of what's happening in the high security prisons. Islamist gangs terrorising staff and terrorising other prisoners. So prisoners who might have gone in on what used to be called ordinary decent criminals. Of course, they aren't decent. It's your tongue in cheek there. But people have gone in for things like armed robbery, murder, nothing to do with Islamist terrorism. And they're being told you've got to convert to Islam, otherwise we're going to come for you. Let's speak to international security expert Will Geddes, who is with us now. Will, do you see this as a big problem? Because these places like HMP Franklin, for example, where there were those attacks last weekend, they're meant to be really secure. They're meant to isolate many prisoners, certainly from Islamists, yet this is clearly a problem that is big and growing.
It's more than that, Peter. It really is a pretty abysmal situation right now. You've got a number of issues that you've got to consider. First of which is there are some 18% of all prisoners identify as Muslim. Then if we add to that equation, you look at that 18% and you compare it against the 6.5% of Muslims in the United Kingdom. And then you bear in mind that in many Category A prisons, like Whitemore, for example, there's 45% of them are individuals that identify as Muslims. So when you have new prisoners coming in for whatever crime that they've been prosecuted for, when they get into the prison, they have to align themselves to some gang. And if you've got a vast majority of extreme Muslims in that particular prison, then many of them will identify to Muslim beliefs only to ensure their own personal safety.
And this is a really, really big issue, and we know that these Islamists are in those prisons. HMP Franklin, for example, last weekend, that horrendous attack, still people I think there's still one prison officer who is in hospital as a result of those injuries, life-changing for them. Is it possible to keep Islamists isolated and them not infect others with their poisonous ideology, or is that just totally unrealistic?
Sadly, I mean, it should be realistic, Peter. You're absolutely right. But what we're talking about here is, again, that dreaded body, the European Court of Human Rights.
Here we go.
Sticking into the situation, and particularly Article 8, if any of the viewers and listeners want to look it up, where there was a very recent case of an individual that was a drug dealer and a murderer who got convicted, got sent into a prison, was then causing much harm to other prisoners. He was then put into what they call a separation centre, which is where you put certainly extremists into these particular areas. But what he's managed to do with his ambulance-chasing lawyers, no doubt, is to achieve basically a bypass through Article 8 of the European Human Rights Courts on the contraventions of his human rights, supposedly, that he can be brought out of this separation centre. Now, the problem with this is it sets a precedent, Peter, as you can imagine, for any other extremist who goes, you know what, I don't like it in separation, I'm going to go back into general population. And the problem you then have is just literally feeding on itself in terms of these individuals. But you look at the number, there's 15,500 Islamic extremists who are in prison right now. That is a significant number of people. And that, again, proportionally, is far greater than it perhaps should be.
We've got a message here from this person saying no name on it, out of control prisons, why are we paying for all these evil people? Deport all of them. I'm sick paying tax to look after these thugs. Deport them now. I mean, the fact is that there are some we could deport, but there are also Islamists who were born in this country or indeed converted in this country or converted to Islamism. Obviously, there's a difference between violent Islamism and just the Islamic faith. But clearly, there are people from this country who are being radicalised or are terrorists born in this country. We can't deport them, can we?
No, we can't, but we need to address our prison system because at the moment, from what it looks like, it's almost a holiday. They get PlayStations, they get education, they get 3 square meals a day. They may not be the meals that you or I would want to choose, Peter, but they're being fed. They're not paying rates. They're not paying electricity bills. They're not paying for the things that the rest of us are having to deal with on a daily basis. And we as taxpayers are contributing to this somewhat cushy life that many of them are experiencing. Now, that doesn't detract from the fact that there are serious prisoners who are doing serious time and they are being penalised for it. But the fact that they can bypass using human rights law to try and get even more preferable treatment really does make a joke of the whole thing. And we need to overhaul this entire judicial system. And I'm sorry, but whether I did or I didn't vote for Brexit, I thought half the benefit of doing so was to take us out of these quongos like the European Court of Human Rights, so that we weren't going to be at the mercy of them and criminals exploit them to their advantage.
Will, thank you for that. Sorry, we're just slightly losing the line there. Apologies for the quality of the line there, but great quality of commentary there from Will. Of course, the European Court of Human Rights separate from the EU, but a lot of people don't make that distinction and want us to withdraw from both of them. We're asking that question as well today. We're asking lots of questions, lots of people getting in touch on all sorts of things, including the thought of Mike Tapp, the Labour MP earlier on, who suggested that he thought Reform UK were pretend patriots. This is what Ian has had to say on a voice note about that.
Hi Peter, it's Ian from East Grinstead. Talking about Farage and patriotism, actually talking about patriotism in general, what kind of politicians are patriots who take our armed serving men and put them to trial for actually doing their job, meanwhile letting terrorists roam free? And I'm talking about the IRA in particular here. Tell me, what party, was the man who was involved in that? Can't remember now, it slipped my mind.
Yeah, Ian, I think it's a very, very interesting point, that whole idea of legacy, how you deal with the problems of the past in Northern Ireland, and those, what some people think are witch hunts against former soldiers for things that they were ordered to do in Northern Ireland. Mark's been in touch with a voice note as well on Nigel Farage in terms of what Mike Tapp had to say.
Morning, Peter. Great show as ever, mate. Yeah, you guessed Nigel Farage, you know, Putin apologist, well, load of nonsense. Basically, this is the same Nigel Farage that was quite happy to accuse people that were criticising him over the Rupert Lowe situation as Russian bots. You know, it doesn't exactly sound like a Putin apologist, does it? But then again, what the left don't seem to understand, and certainly this government don't seem to understand, is we can actually see the Russian propaganda when it's there. But we can also see the Western propaganda that they like to fill us with in order to siphon more of our money off to their mates in the defence industry. You know, it's absolute joke. It's, you know, who's got the contract to rebuild Ukraine? Oh, funny enough, that's BlackRock, isn't it? One of the biggest defence manufacturers. You know, it's funny how, you know, we also see things like Bill Gates, BlackRock turn up to number 10. And a week or so later, we have new farming policies. Isn't that strange? You know, but then again, I'm just a Russian bot, aren't I? Ya Sib, ya!
Mark, thank you for that. I'm sure BlackRock would deny any wrongdoing or anything of any level of impropriety, but certainly I think those points from Mark, at least questioning that, is absolutely fine. And we are the home of free speech, and we broadcast all sorts of opinions. So you want to get yours on the air, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We're talking about the care system. We're going to do more of that. Going to take a call on that very shortly. Also, Victory In, with 2 N's, Europe, pubs to stay open later as part of the VE Day 80th celebrations. We're going to talk to Michael Kill, Chief Executive of the Nighttime Industries Association, about that in just a second, and get your reaction to the Andrew Tate phenomenon. Stay with us here on Talk.
We've been talking this morning about a new theme park which is going to be built. The Universal Studios apparently going to build it in Bedfordshire. We've been asking many of you to give us some ideas for theme parks. Alison in South Wales says in the new theme park at 5 p.m. every day they could have the PIP parade. All the people driving their brand new Motability cars.
Instead of the water rapids, you can have a road you go down that's full of potholes in a car with bad suspension and flat tyres. I don't know why they're bothering building a theme park in this country. They're going right, no one will be able to afford to go to it anyway.
How about the Rachel Reeves ride, says Terry in Birmingham. You go round and round and vanish up your own deficit. It's the HS2 ride. It travels at high speed for 10 feet, where everyone gets off and into the replacement bus ride. Tickets are £50 if bought 5 months in advance, or £1,000 on the day.
There's a strong rumour going around that Rachel Reeves is going to have a kissing booth at this theme park. So what I do, mate, I shove a 5 in a pot and you can go in and fill your boots.
Thank you very much indeed. Very generous of you. One from G, who says fast-track entry to every ride for illegals, plus a free night stay in the Parks Hotel and free food. New theme park bumper cars will have to pay a congestion charge, and the funhouse isn't built yet, despite Angela Rayner's pledge to build houses. What about Ghost Train doesn't move because the driver's on strike? Have a good day. This is brilliant for the theme park. How about grow your own cannabis farm? Yeah, that's a good one. An Ethiopian safari park narrated by Angela Rayner, says Gary in Durham. How about that? This sums up the Labour Party to me. The one idea they have to improve growth for the economy is to basically have a bloody big fun fair. It's the type of idea primary school children would pitch, given 10 minutes to come up with something. Well, it turns out, Matt, in Royston, that it's not even their idea. But they're now trying to claim it's their idea, even though it was actually the Tories.
They have done brilliantly on breakfast, but you know on Drive you've done brilliantly as well. Downhill slide rides surrounded by ULEZ cameras so that people are fined on exit. Love it. You could have a Birmingham-themed Whack the Rat stall. If you whack the rat, you can have your bin emptied for free. On the Labour theme park, a house of mirrors where they're all boarded up because they can't bear to look themselves in the eye.
I've got a great one for you, mate.
This is for the is this for the Universal theme park run by Labour?
Yeah, moat right around the park.
Yeah.
With loads of dinghies. Call it a channel and say anyone who can break in, all is free.
Imagine a Scouser say you can break into a theme park for free.
Hi, Jeremy. Hey, it's simple. You've got the Labour Ghost Train.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, On your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell with you until 1 o'clock, and indeed tomorrow between 10 and 1, and for a special Easter bonus on Monday between 10 and 1, where I'll be identifying as Julia Hartley-Brewer for that 3-hour period. Let us know what you think on all the stories we're talking about today. 0344 499 1000. Great news coming in a minute. That is that pubs are going to stay open a bit later as part of the VE Day 80th celebrations. That is happening, of course, next month as we celebrate the end of World War II, 80 years on from that, and salute our heroes, many of whom very sadly have left us, but quite a few still with us, which is great. Andrew Tate phenomena surges in schools with boys refusing to talk to female teachers. We're going to talk to Marilyn Hawes, the Chief Executive of Freedom from Abuse, about that. A little bit about the Trump state visit later on. One of my favourite guests, Daniel Britton, is coming up. He is a legend and a parliamentary and constitutional historian. Loads of calls coming in as well. There's one on care I'm going to take in a minute on the care system. Lots of people getting in touch about that. Whether it's tweets, whether it's text, whether it's voice notes, however you want to get in touch, let us know. I'll tell you now how you do that. 0344 499 1000. That's the number to give me a ring, to send me a voice note, or to send me a WhatsApp text message. You can also send me a traditional text message on 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can also, as I say, ring me, voice note me, send me a WhatsApp message on the main number 0344 499 1000. Plenty to talk about between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. Just on Twitter, I've been on my tweets there during the news break, and this person says, if that's correct that Islamists born here cannot be deported, well, I suppose where would you deport them to necessarily? Then Britain deserves everything that's coming. I've had enough, Peter. I'm sick of hearing this insane response to terrorists and child rapists. I will not shed a tear at any further terror attacks or rapes. Terry says, Peter, are you a member of Reform? I enjoy listening to your shows, but your Reform bias is obvious. Terry, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I'm not a member of any political party. I'm not a member of Reform UK. I used to be a member of the Conservative Party. I'm not anymore. I've moved on, I think, for the Conservative Party. Certainly the party's moved on from me. I was a member for 3.5 years, or a bit longer actually, about 4 years, and I was a special advisor for that government for 3.5 years, but I'm not a member of Reform UK, and I'm not likely to be either. Angela says, I didn't think your show could get any better, but now Will Geddes was on prison security. Another person says, how many times do we have to say deport all foreign criminals, including all Islamists, round them up and deport them, let's get rid of them. And another person says, Mike Tapp makes my blood boil. He served a few years in the intelligence corps. I served 25 plus. He calls people false patriots, but joined the party that lied us into war in Iraq and is now in bed with China. Labour and its MPs are a threat to our national security. On the point of carers, and we're going to come to a carer call in just a minute, Julie says, please can you give a shout out to all the amazing young carers in the UK? Very happy to do so. No one ever talks about them, says Julie, and Boris Johnson asked for a cross-border party cooperation regarding social care when he first got in. Why didn't Labour want to help him then? Well, listen, it's a big issue. We're going to come back to it in just a minute, but first I want to speak to Michael Kill. He is Chief Executive of the Nighttime Industries Association. Good news, I think, Mike, in that pubs are to stay open later as part of the VE Day celebrations. We can raise a glass, in my case a non-alcoholic one, but for many people a pint of the good stuff to our heroes. I'm sure that's something you welcome, especially after all that the Nighttime Industries have been through in recent years.
Absolutely. I mean, I've got a very strong connection to the military, so I know how important it is to honour that legacy of people who have served and given us those freedoms that we have today. But it's also to recognise the community spirit that was carried through that war period and how much that's represented within the pubs and hospitality sector that we represent as an industry. So this extended period that we are allowed or being given is fantastic at such a really challenging time for the hospitality sector, and it's going to go some way to trying to help, but as you can appreciate, it's not going to solve everything, but it's just giving people that little bit more hope and that breathing space.
It might just remind people as well, look, the pubs are there. There's some really, really good boozers out there where you can have a lovely time, whether you want to go to watch the football, whether you want to go just with your friends to somewhere a bit quieter. I haven't had a drink in 7 years, but I love the pub. I go to my local my local boozer for a pub quiz fairly often. We have a good team together weather as well. We have some nice food there as well. But pubs are under such pressure, and I go to my local pub as much as I can. But like many people, I am worried it will close.
Without a doubt. I mean, the cost of operating these venues now is so challenging. We're talking about nearly 40% more expensive than pre-pandemic, and that doesn't include the extension of taxation that came on the 1st of April, which is going to see between 30 and 80k per year added on. So we are really at a critical point, and every moment or opportunity we've got to grab with both hands. So, you know, as you say, there are some amazing pubs, amazing food, amazing craft ale, venues and spaces out there. Please, and I would urge everyone during this period, go out and enjoy those local environments. They are so important to our communities and were so important 80 years ago, and we need to bring that back as much as possible, because that spirit is so important within in each of these communities up and down the country.
What would you say to people who say, look, do you know what, my bills have just gone up, my water bill's just gone up, my electricity bill's gone up, maybe the rent or mortgage has gone up as well. The pub just isn't a priority for me, and I'll maybe just get a few cans and celebrate at home and toast our heroes there. I mean, what would you say to those people to say, like, give the pub a chance?
I would just, without a doubt, give the pub a chance. Remember what they're there for. Remember the part that they played, the community spirit that was sort of born from periods of crisis like war. We have seen it somewhat during the sort of COVID period where people came together collectively. We know it's pressurizing at the moment, but we also have to remember it's not always about drinking alcohol or having a pint. As you quite rightly said, that social economy is so important for people's mental health and mental well-being, as well as shaping communities in the future and enjoying culture. So, you know, please come together, bring your family, come along with friends, celebrate, be part of a really important sort of moment 80 years on, of something that was celebrated and something that's given us the freedoms to be able to go to the pub today.
Yes, absolutely.
That's the important part we need to harness here.
Mike, thanks for your thoughts there. Michael Kill there, who is Chief Executive of the Nighttime Industries Association. Lots of people getting in touch about all sorts of different issues, including Simon in Leon Solent, who says, I'm currently actually in Spain because I hate the way our country has changed. When I get home, I'm moving to the Isle of Wight because there's such low immigration there. Great show. And someone called Jessica, but says that's not a real name. I've been a carer for 22 years. It is completely broken. We are allocated plan calls that do not work. It is absolutely shocking. Well, Carol in Cornwall has got in touch on 0344 499 1000. Carol's husband is in a care home, and I'm sure you have a very informed view, Carol, on the care system. Where is it in this country? And did what Narda was saying earlier on, did that strike a chord?
In some ways it did, but I'm afraid things have turned from bad to worse, Peter. He was in a care home, and I'll cut this as short as possible. I'm not mentioning...
Take your time, Carol. There's no rush.
Okay, I just don't want to waste your time.
You're not wasting my time.
Okay, well, I won't be mentioning any names.
Sure.
So I got a phone call in February of an afternoon from a nurse saying that he had a chest infection and she was going to give him intravenous antibiotics, and was that okay? I said, yes, absolutely. Please keep me informed. So then in the middle of the night at 2:57, that would be on the Friday morning, a paramedic phoned to say that my husband was in critical condition and that he was being admitted to the acute hospital in Cornwall. Mm-hmm. Well, in the morning, the doctors phoned me from the resuscitation unit to ask about resuscitating him if that became necessary, and I said, no, don't do that, because what are we saving him for?
Yeah.
And the doctor agreed that I'd made the right clinical decision, so we were in no conflict at all. However, his situation was critical. He had double pneumonia, and they told me he had only hours to live. Now, you do not develop double pneumonia overnight.
Yeah.
That will take at least 4 days for you to be quite ill, for someone to notice that you have a problem. No one noticed. However, he's now in hospital, and I'm repeatedly told that he only has hours to live. I'm there, and you're doing everything you can. He was in the resuscitation unit. Then he was moved to the acute medical ward. And then he moved to a different ward where there were a lot of elderly people, and they were still expecting him to die. even though they were still keeping him on intravenous antibiotics. He was very frail and in a very poorly condition. Now, I have to tell you, I am no fan of the NHS, but I have to tell you that his care at this hospital was beyond excellent. I could not fault them at all. Anyhow, so against all the odds, he has pulled through, and he has survived. Now, we need to get him from hospital into a nursing home, because this is not the stuffing out of him. So he can't go back to where he was, not that I would want him to go back there, because they neglected his care in the first place. So the social services and the NHS, now they put him out for bidding, and a nursing home bid for him, and he was admitted to this nursing home. And I went to visit him. He needed some socks and stuff, a few bits and pieces. So I went. Well, when I was admitted, it was as if I was going into a dungeon. It was as if I was going into a property from the 15th century that had never been renovated.
Right.
And now the manager there is perfectly pleasant, and I appear to we can talk, and I'm hoping that we're going to sort something out. But you cannot move in this place. It's a nursing home, supposed to be, but it must be a high security unit.
Right.
And Derek should not be in a high security unit.
Yeah.
You cannot get through any door. Every door you have to press the, you're escorted.
Yes, the call.
You're not on your own. You're escorted, and so everything has to everything out. Well, then I saw his room. He wasn't in it. I saw his room, and I was appalled. It's small. I'm sure cells in prisons are bigger.
Right.
The bed was pushed against the wall because there's no other room. There's a chest of drawers, no television there because you've got to pay extra for that, and anyhow, there's no television, and not even a chair for a visitor to sit on. There's no room for a chair.
And you're paying for this, Carol, aren't you?
Well, we were paying £7,000 a month for the other place.
Yes, that he's left, and that you argue has had an adequate care. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So now, at the moment, because they have taken most of his money down to the legal limit, we're now paying hundreds of pounds a month, so to whatever. But at the moment, Peter, I'll have to make this clear, at the moment, the NHS are paying for him because they have designated where he's gone. There will be an assessment, which I will attend at the end of May, and then at that assessment, it will be decreed whether the NHS will continue to pay for him or whether we have to start picking up the tab and spending hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds every month towards his care. That has not been determined yet. However, this room, I was horrified. The window looked out onto, I don't know, some sort of a walls, there was no view, nothing.
Yes.
And so I was escorted to, because I wanted to see him, I was escorted to a sitting room where people were sitting around the edges, and there was a television on, and there was someone there, sitting there permanently, presumably to keep an eye on things.
Yeah. And
he was as far away from them as he could get. So I spoke to him.
It doesn't fill you with confidence, Carol, and I know, and we've spoken on a few occasions, Carol, and I know you have done absolutely everything you can to ensure Derek has the best possible care that he can have with the very many challenges that he has had, and that has brought great challenges for you, logistically, emotionally, financially, and here you are, and he's deteriorated yet further. We are saying, and in fairness, you haven't mentioned the name of any care home or anything, but you're certainly, your contention is that neglect led to him getting pneumonia. He's having a really, really rough time. And you're battling yet again with a system that just doesn't seem to work and doesn't seem to be fair.
Well, no, you see, I'm going to have to walk a very tight line here, and any advice or guidance from those listening to this programme who have been in this situation, I would certainly be listening.
Sure.
Now, the thing is this. He said, you must go from here. You must go from here. Go. So I went. Now, his sister is going to visit him this week, and I'm going to... Well, I know what she's going to say, but I mean, the point is I'm going to get her opinion of everything, and I'm going to make an appointment to see the manager and to see if we can arrange for something much better for Derek. Yeah. Derek is not a prisoner. Derek has done nothing wrong. Mm-hmm. Derek is in a high security unit. That tells me that there will be dangerous people there.
Yes, yes.
And he should not be exposed to this. And he should never, ever have been transferred to a place like this. And that is what is wrong with the care system. There is no decent place, or no decent place has bidded for him. So look, I have to speak to this manager who appears to be pleasant.
Yeah. And Carol, just to sum up, I think my impression of what you're telling me, and I know we've spoken before,
yeah.
and please do keep giving me a ring and keep me updated on what's happening with Derek. I mean, you're someone who I know has done everything you can. You and Derek have both contributed to this, to our society, to our economy in many, many ways.
Yes.
And we're in a situation where, you know, it is. A society can be judged on how it treats the most vulnerable people, the people who have, who really are in dire straits, and Derek is one of those people.
Yes.
And they're treating him this way, and that to me doesn't seem fair and doesn't seem in any way kind.
It's horrific. Can you imagine having someone who's been through so much, whose suffering continues? We prayed for him to die, but he didn't die, and because then he would be out of his misery. And now he finds himself, apparently he won't get out of his bed. No. Well, I don't blame him for not getting out of his bed, and I have somehow got to get him moved to a better facility, but they could turn around and say to me, you'll have to take him home, and I can't look after him at home.
Nor should you be expected to. Carol, I just have one more question.
Yes.
Before I let you go. How are you doing?
No, I'm doing fine, Peter. The thing is that it's just very difficult. It just seems to me that it goes from bad to worse, and you keep constantly fighting. But I'm doing fine. I've told you before, I've had a very resilient upbringing, and it is coming to the fore now. Mm-hmm. I will fight for him, but if I fight too much, I could put him in a worse place. Yeah.
It's as you say, there is a line to tread there. Carol, thank you for that update, and thank you for your telling us about your experience of the care system. And Carol is just one person of many millions of people who are dealing with a system that doesn't work, a system that is broken, a system our government needs to fix. And it is one of those issues that so few people will talk about. And on this station, we have the freedom, we have the time, and we have the inclination to talk about all sorts of topics that lots of other places just don't talk about, that ignore. And I think the government, successive governments, not just Labour, the Conservatives as well, the government of which I was part, has ignored this issue. It needs to sort it out. It needs to help people like Carol. It needs to help people like Derek. Stay with us here on Talk.
Look, I don't know what Mr. Lowe is up to. What I do know is there is a police investigation. I do know that there is an investigation by the parliamentary authorities. Those will sort of carry on follow their course. But bluntly, we're just moving on. We are obviously we're working hard, campaigning around the country. And May the 1st is a very important day for all political parties, including Reform UK.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Ian's been in touch and says, where is the benign, intrusive care quality commission in Carol's saga with Derek? I suppose languishing in their posh offices in Holborn, polishing their clipboards. And Dave says, good afternoon, Peter. As a veteran, I welcome the pubs being allowed to celebrate VE Day, but sadly, how many drinkers will even give the brave generation a second thought? That's Dave in Lancashire. Well, we should all salute those who fought for our freedom so that we can have the home of free speech, so that we can have the freedom to go to a pub, the freedom to disagree with one another, the freedom not to speak German, and the freedom not to live under the Nazi jackboot. Lots to discuss between now and 1 o'clock, including the Andrew Tate phenomenon. This has surged in schools. Very interesting story. The NASUWT, huge teaching union, says that nearly 3 in 5 of its members believe social media use has contributed to a deterioration in pupils' behaviour. One teacher says she's had 10-year-old boys refuse to speak to her because she is a woman. Another teacher said the Andrew Tate phenomenon has a huge impact on how pupils at an all-boys school interacted with females and males they did not see as masculine. Another respondent said schools had experienced some incidents of derogatory language towards female staff as a direct result of Andrew Tate's videos. Well, is he a sort of pantomime villain in this, or does he have a case to answer in terms of how young children, and they are children, are treating women in our society and in schools as well? Marilyn Hawes is with us. She's Chief Executive of Freedom from Abuse. Marilyn, I wonder what you make of this story.
Well, thank you for having me on again. Yes, they're right. 100%. I mean, I've been in schools going back 2 years now, where the disrespect shown to not just female teachers, but also the students, absolutely horrendous the way some of the boys talk to the girls. It's awful. I want to know where the online safety bill is. Where is Ofcom? Because they were supposed to be taking down all this stuff. I am being asked now to go into schools and talk to 10-year-olds who are becoming misogynistic and toxic masculinity in primary schools. I've been into schools where, as I said, the behaviour is feral. I mean, I was deputy head. I mean, I just don't understand. Where are the boundaries? Where are the deterrents? Where is the teaching? You see, the thing is, what I've found in all the schools I've gone in, they're obsessed with consent. If I said to you now, Peter, can I do something, blah, 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 and you said no, if I don't respect you, I'm going to do it anyway because I feel entitled. And this is the trouble. This is the mantra that Tate feeds right into pornography.
Is it just him? Is it just him, Marilyn? Because what you're telling me and what you're talking about is it's about teachers, it's about pupils, it's clearly about parents as well. I mean, he to some people he's a sort of pantomime villain, to other people he's a very, very evil person, to others he's a hero. And I just wonder, does he represent that culture that you're talking about, or is he behind it all? What do you think of him personally?
I think it's a mix of everything, but the lads I talk to, they do admire him. I actually say to them, what do you like about him? And they go, well, you know, he's got lots of women and he's got lots of nice cars and he's got lots of money, and it's all about the materialistic side of what he portrays. And you try and have this conversation, but he's also exploitative to women. And
he would deny that, of course, Marilyn, but
of course he would. But if you look at the statistics of children, 1 in 4 children aged 10 are watching pornography. Or have watched it, and 1 in 3 up to 12 are. That whole mantra of Andrew Tate, the humiliation, the degradation of women, feeds right into his mantra, and it's a mix of all of that. So then the online safety bill has no teeth. I mean, what's the point of it? There really is. There's no point.
Let me just ask you a question that Barry has asked me. He sent a message and he says, could you ask Marilyn to define toxic masculinity. What do you think that is, Marilyn?
Right, okay, right. Well, I know what it is because I've had experience of it in my first marriage. It's if you say to a guy, a lad, so what is masculinity? What does it mean? I can tell you what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean being abusive, hitting women, swearing at them, being a general bully, shouting, strutting around, thinking, look at me, I'm a man. No, you're not, because real men don't need to do that. Real men stand on a sure ground. They are empathic, they take responsibility, they have a strength about them that need not be aggressive. So, you know, my husband now is a fighter pilot in the Navy. He's never shouted, but he's a strong, dependable person. He knows who he is. And I think the trouble is with teenagers, they are awash with what's on social media. And a lot of youngsters, young men as well as young women, they question the way they look. They're gangly. They don't know, you know, where they belong, sort of thing. But, you know, I'd say to them, go out and get yourself fit, go to a gym or go out running, get an interesting hobby. Where are the men that are also having these conversations with the young lads? I mean, it hopefully would be like a very responsible father, but it might be just somebody at the school, somebody who can literally have a good influence on them of how to be. The trouble is also the watching of pornography and listening to this dovetailing of Tate. This is proven to have increased harmful sexualized behaviors in schools. There's an entitlement about them. This is my right. No, it isn't. It's not your right. You have to earn that right. You have to earn respect. You know, and that's, I believe, is not what's being taught in schools enough. Then you get boys say, oh, will say to me, so how do I have sex? But what is going on in your sex education in schools, for goodness sake? A lot of the boys will say, it's crap. And yes, it probably is, because I don't believe in, as a teacher, I would not have wanted to have taught that, because you are limited to how far you can go. And I think that's a lot of the problem here, is that people are so frightened in this woke society about what you can say, what you can't say. Disciplining in schools is hard. What do you say now? Is a parent going to suddenly jump up and try and get you, you know, lose your job? No one really knows what those parameters should be. And, you know, you have all sorts of weirdos coming into schools that completely distort the youngsters' thinking.
If you don't know the parameters, if you and I sitting here as adults don't know the parameters, how do we expect teenagers to know that either? And when they see someone who's a charismatic, sure figure who says, right, do this, do this, do this, and you know, you will have success with women, or you will be respected as a man, or whatever, that can be a very powerful and arresting message, can't it? No matter where it comes from.
I agree, but I just think there needs to be that conversation in schools. A lot of schools are frightened of even saying Andrew Tate's name, right? So there is a book, actually, which I would recommend, Why Men Hate Women, and it's written, you can get it on Amazon, it's written by Laura Bates, and it was very acclaimed on Radio 4, actually, about this, and a lot of schools have bought it. There has to be a better understanding between people, and a conversation. When I have sat with 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, I've sat with 15-year-olds, you know, explain to me, what are your issues? How do you feel as a young boy in today's world? I mean, are we having those conversations? I do, but do the staff, do they have the time? Do the parents? I do think parents offload so much on schools now that teachers are just social workers in many respects.
Let me ask you one other thing, Marilyn, that Stuart has messaged in and says, hello, Peter, Marilyn is just man-blaming. What would you say to Stuart?
No, I'm not. I am not man-blaming. I love men. I absolutely love men. But you can't get away from the fact that men are more abusive than women. There's a thing called misandry, and that is women that are very abusive to men. I do not like men haters. I am not a man hater, but you cannot get away from the experience I've had in schools, the experience I deal with domestic abuse incidents and I'm always pushing, what about the men? What about the men who are abused by toxic women? Toxic femininity also exists, but we are talking here about Andrew Tate, and his impact can absolutely be seen in schools. But I think someone needs to actually sit down with small groups of boys, expand what they're thinking, expand how they're feeling about themselves, mentor them more. Boys are lost in the system. I have 3 boys. I adore boys. They're so interesting. Young men are interesting. I'm not a man hater at all.
Okay.
I prefer them to women anytime you like.
Thank you, Marilyn. Much appreciate your thoughts this afternoon. That's Marilyn Halls there, who's the Chief Executive of Freedom from Abuse. People are reacting to this already, including Gary has sent me a voice note.
Hi Peter, this is Gary from Oxon-on-the-Wirral. Just with regards to your last lady guest there, she's used the word toxic masculinity. I think this is a dangerous label anyway. It sort of tars every man with the same brush. Andrew Tate may have an influence, but I believe it's the deliberate emasculation or attempts to emasculate men using the label with a broad brush, i.e. toxic masculinity. This is causing the uprising, if you like. Men are trying to be suppressed and they are fighting against it, and this is the result. Tate has little to do with it.
Okay, thanks for your thoughts, Gary. What do you think about what Gary said? What do you think about what Marilyn Hall says? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about all the other issues that people want to talk about today. Mike Tapp, I mean, it was 2 hours ago, but still people are angry about it. We're going to talk to Daniel Britton in a second, who is one of my favourite guests. He is the nerd of nerds. I speak as a nerd. He's a parliamentary and constitutional historian and is going to tell us what we can expect when Donald Trump visits. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Ian has sent a voice note in about Andy Williams, who was on earlier on. This is what Ian has to say.
Morning, Peter. Ian in Hemel Hempstead. Andy talks about that having to be replicated across all of those seats, the by-election, the poll results that chap spoke of. We've got over 4 years for this to happen. Labour have done so much damage and are so hated 9-10 months down the line. Can you imagine another 4 years? Yes, they'll save a few quid, so that the last few months of their tenancy, they'll be able to give back. They'll put in the usual tax rises and all the rest of it. But 3.5, 4 years of this absolute nonsense. They're taking us all for fools. Have a great morning.
Thanks, Ian. Appreciate that. Listen, there are lots of things in that, and all I would say is that political fortunes change dramatically in short periods of time. I think Reform are doing really well at the moment. I think that's going to be displayed at the results of the council elections, which are coming up in about 10 days' time. I think the Conservatives will do fairly badly. I think Labour will do okay-ish. The Lib Dems will do okay-ish. That's my prediction anyway. I could be totally wrong. All I would say is that 4 years ago, we thought that Boris Johnson was going to have a fifth term. So, look, things can change dramatically. Let's hear what Nick has to say about Nigel Farage being Prime Minister.
Good morning, Peter. It's Nick Moore from Loughborough. I think Nigel Farage has a very real opportunity and a very good chance of becoming Prime Minister at the next general election. All he has to do is basically what Starmer did for the last year or so of the Conservatives' tenure, and that is very little, because this government is digging all the holes it needs to do to fall away and disappear without a trace, and they make so many mistakes. The one thing I would say is Nigel Farage has to be very careful now. He's got a big target painted on his back, and people will be shooting at him, and I can see a lot of lawfare being waged against him to bring him down, because that's the only way they're going to stop him. Have a good Easter, Peter.
Nick, thank you, and happy Easter to you. And of course, just to be really clear there, Nick was speaking metaphorically in regard to the target on Nigel's back. We need to be really careful in the language we use. I'm not criticising Nick at all, but certainly there have been attacks against politicians. Nick was speaking certainly in favour of Nigel Farage. I imagine Nick thinks Nigel Farage is a great guy from what he was saying there and should be Prime Minister. All I would say is just when we do use these metaphors and so on, listen, we're the home of free speech. You can say whatever you like, of course you can, but we just need to be a little bit careful sometimes about that, just in regard to some of the attacks that have been on, and certainly we attack them verbally, and that's absolutely fine, and I do that as well as you, but just be careful on that particular front. Maybe I'm being too cautious here, but I just think it's something we should think about. But great message from Nick, good thoughts in there, thanks to Ian as well. More voice notes coming up in a second, but now I want to speak to Daniel Britton. He is a parliamentary and constitutional historian, one of my favourite guests, I must say. Daniel, Donald Trump is coming for a second state visit. We know it's going to happen in September. That's what he said. What can we expect this time? How will it be different from the last one, or will it be largely the same? Of course, there's a different monarch this time. Very sadly, Queen Elizabeth II has left us.
Well, it'll certainly be interesting when it comes, and I think it will be full of, no doubt, demonstrations will be around the place. We'll all be anxiously wondering what Trump is going to say. It's a very interesting meeting between the King and Trump, because I don't think the King gets up every morning saying, drill, baby, drill. He seems to have such completely different views on the environment and on climate change. So it's quite a diplomatic manoeuvre that the King will have to put on. But we've seen in recent months he is very skilled at that. But handling Trump is clearly quite tricky, both for the monarch and for the government. And no doubt we'll be expecting something from him. Maybe he'll make a significant announcement when he's here. Be very interesting to see what the tour actually is. It's likely to be, 3, 4, maybe even 5 days. At this very minute, I imagine officials are trying to lay on something that will be suitably interesting and keep Trump amused. Well, just one tiny caveat. There was a little bit of talk of a private visit before the state visit. It seems to be that this is the state visit, but there was talk of a private visit before that. Maybe it's that. September's not a great time for a state visit. A lot of party conferences going on. Maybe he'll go off to see Nigel Farage at his party conference. You never know. Well, let's just hear what the President of the United States said the other day when he was questioned about this, his words in regard to the state visit, which we think is going to be in September.
I was invited by the King and by the country, great country, they're going to do a second, as you know, a second fest, and that's what it is. It's a fest, and it's beautiful, and it's the first time it's ever happened to one person, and the reason is that we have 2 separate terms, and it's an honor to be, I'm a friend of Charles. I have great respect for King Charles and the family, William. We have just a great respect for the family, and it's a very great honor that and I think they're setting a date for September.
It's going to be a smaller visit initially and then a bigger state visit to follow after, is that the plan?
Yeah, they say that it's going to be, I don't know how it can be bigger than the last one. The last one was, as you know, was incredible. But they say it's going to be even more important. So it's a great honor to be so chosen.
I love him. I love him. It's a great honour to be so chosen, my word. What a great line. Daniel, will it be that different in terms of the actual, number of horses, number of things he does, state dinners?
I did notice there was a hint of a private visit before the state visit.
He didn't quite answer that, did he?
No, I think that I'm sure the horses will all be there. The great thing about state visits is you have to do the same for everyone, whether you particularly like that person or you don't like them. So it will be very, very similar to previous state visits. I think this state visit, having a second one, is unusual. And the government threw out that invitation via the King, and Keir Starmer flourished the letter out of his pocket when he met Trump. The King is clearly keen to see this as well. So it is unusual, it is an honour, but then this country does want to talk to Trump and is worried about the future relationship. So it is important for this country.
I think we can guess the process and the reasons for this particular state visit, but just looking back throughout history, as I know you do on a professional basis, Daniel, what have been the reasons previously? Because we've had some pretty unpleasant people here for state visits. We've honoured them in many, many ways.
Oh, there have been some real horrors, Peter. Nicolae Ceausescu, Robert Mugabe have had state visits to this country. Now, on both those occasions, it's because the government has been wanting to find a way of dealing with that person. In Romania's case, Nicolae Ceausescu, the government thought they might be able to prize him away from Moscow a wee bit. He'd been very uncomplimentary about the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia. In Robert Mugabe's case, we'd seen the start of the land grab against white farmers. I think the UK government wanted to see if it could influence that at all. But you do really have to feel for, in those days, the Queen actually having to put up with these guests at Buckingham Palace. We know that she told a friend that when she saw Ceausescu walking towards her in the palace grounds, she went to hide behind a bush so that he wouldn't see her. So, it's a diplomatic dance, Peter.
What do they achieve, these state visits, do you think? I mean, is it tangible? And I wonder if you could just give us a sense of the preparation that so many military officers, protocol people, advisors behind the scenes will actually have to put into a state visit, because there's so much preparation, isn't there? Months of planning.
Months of planning, particularly with the Foreign Office and the Palace, and working together. But we do all this planning because they are so important. Both sides are probably looking to get something out of it at the end. Something that we might not expect, something that's a bit better than it might have been had there not been a state visit.
Yes.
So, that we do these state visits because we are looking for something else. We're looking for something out of it, and we're using it to build relations with that country. So it is important. It's important for the Palace, and it's important for the Foreign Office and the government. And the Palace wants to make sure, is very keen to make sure, that it puts on the best possible show and provides the best possible welcome.
Daniel, thank you, as always. Daniel Britton there, parliamentary and constitutional historian, a man who knows his Fitzalan Persimmon extraordinaries, let me tell you. He is a good man, very interesting guest, as always. Lots of people getting in touch about all sorts of things. Let's play a couple of voice notes before the break. Let's hear from Judy on social care.
Hello, it's Judy from Altos, West Yorkshire. Social care, this one's easy. Costs about, 30 billion a year. All you have to do is get rid of a boatload of quangos, which cost us an absolute fortune, including the 26 that Keir Starmer's brought in, and that will pay for social care for everybody. Free at the moment you need it. No means testing, no nothing. £1,000 a week for a nursing bed, 800 for a residential bed. There you go. I've sorted it all out, and there might even be money left over for tax relief for us all. Thank you.
Judy, you've it all sorted. I think there were actually 33 quangos, certainly quite a lot of them, although they have got rid of one, which is NHS England. But you're right, there is an awful lot of waste. Dave has been in touch about Mike Tapp.
Good morning, Peter. Dave here. Your man Mike Tapp, his mouth runneth over. He should shut it off. Good show, mate.
Thanks, Dave. Succinct. And Tony, on what Andy Williams has been talking about a little bit earlier on the programme.
Morning, Peter. Great show as usual. Just an idea. I reckon we should all wager £10
each. All our talk viewers that think that Andrew guy was talking a load of rubbish this morning. Well, let's see. Let's see if he puts his money where his mouth is, and how far would he go? Hey, that reform won't make government. I can't wait till we get rid of people like them.
Thank you, Tony, for your thoughts. Lots of them coming in, and we're going to take some more calls, texts, tweets after the break, right up to 1 o'clock here on Talk.
Look, I don't know what Mr. Lowe is up to. What I do know is there is a police investigation. I do know that there is an investigation by the parliamentary authorities. Those will sort of carry on follow their course. But bluntly, we're just moving on. We are obviously we're working hard, campaigning around the country. And May the 1st is a very important day for all political parties, including Reform UK.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Tom's been in touch from Kent, and he says that Marilyn Hawes didn't define toxic masculinity. Maybe it doesn't exist. The cause of Tate, Andrew Tate, is toxic femininity, aka feminism. Read the anti-suffragette writings, says Tom in Kent. His opinion on that. Let me know yours, 0344 499 1000. You can send in voice notes on that. If you don't get your voice note or your call on today, remember I'm back tomorrow and Monday between 10 and 1. My usual show tomorrow on a Sunday, as usual, as I say, and then on Monday I'm identifying as Julia Hartley-Brewer. Anthony's been in touch with a voice note.
Hi, Peter. Anthony from Buckinghamshire here. Yeah, just a few points. Just very quickly on reform. The fact that Labour still don't take reform seriously, is, and the Conservatives, well, it's exactly the reason why the Conservatives got booted out. And as for Labour, I think they're going to get a big surprise. I think if you assume most reform voters were Conservative voters, it goes to show that without reform, Conservatives would have walked straight back in. Second point on the pubs, the pubs issue, the pubs closing issue. I love a pint of ale. I like pubs. The issue I've got now is as they're £5 plus. Certainly, you go into London, £7, £8. I'm just not paying that for a pint. So I think, I think the pubs are their own worst enemy in what they're charging as well. They may have their own challenges to face, but when you're saying to the customer, I want £5 plus for that, not from me, sorry. Thanks very much.
Anthony, I know what you mean, and I've been in pubs sometimes, and even I don't drink alcohol, but I haven't in 7 years, but literally, pint of Diet Coke or something, somewhere £4.50, £5, you just think, hold on a second here, that's a huge amount of money for what you're actually giving me. But as anybody in the pub industry will tell you, They've got loads of outgoings. It's really expensive. We do need to support them in some way, but I kind of don't blame you, Anthony, to be honest, especially when everything else is so expensive and going up as well, including the cost of care, which I know is something that Chris in Epsom has given me a ring about. Chris, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter. Can I just touch on immigration first? Mark called earlier, put a bit of context onto it. Maggie kept us out the Schengen area for that reason. And she also, there's a video on YouTube of her telling the Labour Party, so you can't return a man from the country he's come to? No, that's chaos. Just to put that into... Okay. And it all goes back to Blair. All of this nonsense goes back to Blair. Right, care. I've been... In 2016, I had to give up work to help my father care for his sister, who was going down the road of Alzheimer's, and my mother, whose diagnosis of Parkinson's was getting worse. So the problem with the NHS care is that if you qualify for care from the NHS, they put it out to tender and they take the cheapest tender. So same as that Carol was...
Carol in Cornwall, who spoke to us earlier on, Yeah,
I felt for her as well, really did. Now, the other thing is that the private care, right, they are making, some of them are making a fortune. All right, if I want to go away, I haven't had a holiday for a couple of years. Father passed 2 years ago today. It's £1,800 a week for a living carer, and I have to have two because risk assessment says that my mother has to have two carers.
Right.
So that's £3,600 a week for me.
Yeah, I mean, there's so few people who could even begin to afford that kind of money. Yeah. It's huge.
Now, I've gone through, I'm almost at the end of cash resources, so I should be looking to the NHS for help. But in the last 9 years, I've gone through close to £500,000.
Wow. Okay.
That was my pension and my inheritance.
Yeah.
And it's just dissolved. And the private care companies, some of them, not all of them, I have got a couple of good ones, but I've got experience of about 10 or 11. They are charging between £38 and £45 an hour. Mm-hmm. But they're only paying their carers minimum wage, 15 quid. Yeah. Or if it's a senior carer with a few qualifications, maybe £20 an hour. Then what they do is that they have a call here, say at 7 o'clock, and a call 7 miles away at 8 o'clock. Mm-hmm. So they arrive here at 7, but they leave at 10 to 8. And they arrive at the next call at 10 past 8 instead of 8 o'clock. Because the care companies do not put in travel time.
No, you're right. You're right. And a lot of people just don't feel as if they're getting value for the huge amount of money that they are that they're paying.
And the other problem is the care companies that are bidding on NHS contracts that they put out to tender. They're using untrained people. I've had experience of 2 care agencies. Both of which are reported to the
Care Quality Commission. Yeah. Well, listen, Chris. I better leave it there actually, just because I want to get John in before the end. But listen, thanks for your call, and I think you've illustrated the point really, really well in regard to the frustrations so many people have. I've just ended that just for time reasons. But Chris, you're welcome to give me a ring anytime, of course, and you're a valued caller. John's in Dorset. I just want to put him in before the end of the programme. John, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Very briefly, as of April this year, approximately 31 Labour members of Parliament are members of the Unite Union.
Yeah.
And that's from a November report. Now, you will recall that the Labour MPs were gleefully on the picket lines with doctors and anybody else on strike, trying to bring down a Conservative government. It looks like their attack dog is about to turn on them. And the way they fund it is quite interesting. Although Unite only won't fund Starmer direct.
Yeah.
They actually fund the individual MPs up to the tune of about 500,000. That's an official
They often pay for extra research and so on. I mean, a union would say, look, they have a right to do that necessarily, but are you worried that these MPs are in hock to these unions?
Of course they are. I mean, some of these Labour MPs got in on incredibly small margins. And if you're on a 91k a year job with extras coming in from the unions, you're not going to throw that away. He who pays the piper calls the tune.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will agree with that, and they'll agree with your analysis of that, John. Do you, I mean, money in politics is a very, very difficult subject. How do you think political parties should actually be funded, John?
Difficult question, Peter, but basically, when I was working in the USA, you knew which politicians were being bought, and you knew what they were paying for. Here, you know they're being bought, and it's only with a bit of clever investigative journalism you find out that they're getting all kinds of freebies.
Well, I remember, John, when I worked in America, this is literally 15 years ago, someone told me that congressmen and women had to raise $10,000 a week. And this is at the federal level, of course, across the country in Congress, but that was the lowest level in Congress. We're not talking presidents or senators or whatever. We're talking about congressmen having to raise $10,000 a week. I don't want that kind of system. John, thanks for your call. Really appreciate that. And thanks to the top team behind the glass as well, who have made the show today. Tom Williots has been the producer.